Chapter 3599. Chapter 3594. The Last Laugh. In the blink of an eye, the Netherworld Emperor was covered in blood. His face was covered in bloody wounds. He looked terrifying. He roared at the sky and let out a heart-wrenching scream. Nietion frowned. His expression was ugly. He could feel a terrifying killing intent surging inside the Netherworld Emperor's body. It was like a wild beast that threatened to crush his limbs and meridians. It was hard to imagine what kind of pain the Netherworld Emperor was enduring right now. Netherworld Emperor, scream all you want. The louder you scream, the happier and more enjoyable I will be. Li Yanjufeng smiled cold and said, "Do you know that when 7 kills activates extreme kill soul killing, the pain he is enduring is even more terrifying than what you are experiencing right now? Li Yanjufeng, this emperor will kill you." The Netherworld Emperor roared. Like a beast bathed in blood, he suddenly took a step forward and charged at Li Yanjufeng. But his body froze after he charged dozens of meters. His body trembled and he spat out blood. The power of extreme kill soul killing was so terrifying that it almost tore his body to pieces. "Damn it!" the Netherworld Emperor roared. His eyes were vicious, and his body surged with a violent aura of blood. "Even you, the Emperor of the Netherworld, will not be able to withstand the extreme killing soul reaping." Li Yanjufeng smiled cold. Seeing the Netherworld Emperor endure such pain gave him a perverted sense of satisfaction. Extreme kill soul killing was 7 kills bloodline killing move. He used his own bloodline as a guide and merged the soul killing move into his bloodline. This was a bloodline taboo move. Before killing others, he would first kill himself. 7 kills had sacrificed himself to take the Netherworld Emperor down with him. When 7 kills was chosen as a sacrifice, he knew that he would not be able to escape death. That was why he worked with Li Yanjufeng to use extreme kill soul killing. When the Netherworld Emperor absorbed 7 kills bloodline power and activated the great sacrificial formation of Heaven Punishing 9, he had dug his own grave. Li Yanjufeng had predicted everything, arranged everything, and witnessed everything. He wanted to watch the Netherworld Emperor die slowly in front of him. Emperor of the Underworld, the taste of extreme killing soul reaping must be very unpleasant, right? Li Yanjufeng said cold. His eyes shone with a sinister light. He looked like a man-eating beast. "Li Yanjufeng, I never thought that I'd be defeated by you after dominating the world." The Underworld Emperor endured the excruciating pain and roared like a wild beast. "Even if this emperor has to die today, I will kill all of you." Boom. His body shook the moment he finished speaking, and a terrifying aura surged into the air. Immediately, the stench of blood spread out and crashed towards Li Yanjufeng like a tidal wave. Nietion. Li Yanjufeng's eyes trembled when he sensed the killing intent. He cried out. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and slashed down with his sword. A huge sword shadow fell like a mountain and forcefully blocked the monstrous blood chi. Bang! Then, there was a muffled sound, and the Netherworld Emperor was forced several steps back. He vomited a mouthful of blood and trembled. He could barely stand. He could not unleash his full strength under the pressure of extreme killing soul reaping. It was very difficult for him to fight against Nietion. "Li Yanjufeng, give me a reason to save you." Nietion steadied himself and looked cold at Li Yanjufeng. He could just watch from the sidelines and let the Netherworld Emperor and Li Yanjufeng kill each other. "I know how to recover Cher's memories," Li Yanjufeng said solemnly, his eyes trembling slightly. He never thought that the Netherworld Emperor could still erupt with such terrifying power after being hit by extreme killing soul reaping. "That counts as a reason." The corner of Nietion's lips twitched. Then, his eyes turned cold and murderous. He looked at the Netherworld Emperor and said, "Then there is no need for you to live anymore. You think you can kill this emperor? What a joke." The Netherworld Emperor looked at Nietion and smiled cold. he said, "you are just an ant. This emperor can kill you as easily as turning over my hand. You are still so arrogant even in the face of death." As expected of the Netherworld Emperor, Nie Tianling smiled coldly, killing intent surging in his eyes. The Netherworld Emperor smiled cold and said, "This emperor will not die like this." Boom. In the next moment, he attacked directly and slapped out angrily. Immediately, a giant bloody hand appeared and enveloped Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as his expression flickered. In the next moment, he slashed out with his sword. Sword shadows whizzed out like raging dragons. Bang! The two powers collided, and space shook as if it was about to collapse. Nie Tian's figure retreated. While he was still in midair, he vomited a mouthful of blood. He only managed to stabilize himself after retreating several hundred meters. His face had turned even paler. The extreme killing soul-slaying technique is terrifying, but it is not unbreakable. At this moment, the Netherworld Emperor roared. Then, waves of terrifying heaven-punishing demonic energy surged from his body. Demonic energy surged into the sky and roiled violently. It was as if it was going to devour the world. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He did not know what the Netherworld Emperor was planning. "Are you?" Lai Yinjufeng's eyes trembled as if he had realized something. He paused for a moment and exclaimed, "Are you going to forcefully strip the heaven-punishing demon heart?" "Lai Yinjufeng, you are not that stupid after all." The Netherworld Emperor smiled cold and said, "It is true that you have exceeded my expectations by unsealing the memories of 3 lifetimes, but who will win this battle and who will have the last laugh is yet to be determined." Boom! The heaven-punishing demon energy around the Netherworld Emperor became abnormally violent when he finished speaking. He was like an abyss of demonic energy as he unleashed terrifying demonic energy. He was going to strip the heaven-punishing demon heart from his body and use it to break the extreme killing soul-slaying technique. The extreme killing soul-slaying technique was hidden inside the heaven-punishing demon heart. If he could strip the heaven-punishing demon heart, he might have a chance to live. "Nie Tian, stop him!" Lai Yinjufeng's eyes trembled as he shouted like he had gone mad. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed slightly. He tried to take a step forward, but he was struck by the powerful demonic energy and was unable to take another step forward. The heaven-punishing demon energy around the Netherworld Emperor was too terrifying. He could not get close to him at all. Moreover, Nie Tian had reached the limits of his martial body. He did not have much power left. "Nie Tian, what are you waiting for? Kill him now!" Lai Yinjufeng looked at the Netherworld Emperor in shock and shouted. The Netherworld Emperor only had one chance left. It would be terrible if he was allowed to strip the heaven-punishing demon heart. "Shut up!" Nie Tian abruptly turned around. His eyes were as sharp as blades as he rebuked Lai Yinjufeng coldly. Lai Yinjufeng was not injured. He did not dare to attack, so he only knew how to shout. If Nie Tian had the strength, he would have attacked a long time ago. Lai Yinjufeng would not have needed to shout at all. But right now, he did not have the power to kill the Netherworld Emperor. "Lai Yinjufeng, Nie Tian, both of you will die here today." The Netherworld Emperor suddenly growled. The demonic energy around his body became violent to the extreme, and a strange power suddenly surged through the air. Chapter 3600. Meet again. Nie Tian's eyes froze when he saw this. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. What was the Netherworld Emperor trying to do? "Power of the Dawn of Wolves, come out!" The Netherworld Emperor growled again. The bloody tentacles unleashed a violent aura of blood. They formed a blood sacrificial incantation in the air and wrapped around 7 kills and the others. Nie Tian's eyes shook. He then felt the power of the Dawn of Wolves inside 7 kills and the others become active. It seemed like it was about to burst out of their bodies. He wants to absorb their power of the Dawn of Wolves. Nie Tian immediately realized and exclaimed in his mind. The Netherworld Emperor wanted to absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves inside 7 kills and the others. Nie Tian, we cannot let him absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves. Lien Jiufeng also realized and shouted in panic. I know, Nie Tian growled with a frown. The Netherworld Emperor might be able to preserve his life by forcefully removing the heaven-punishing demon heart, but his strength would definitely plummet. In order to recover some of his strength, the Netherworld Emperor wanted to absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves. In reality, the Netherworld Emperor had already made up his mind. After the gate of heaven punishing opened, he would kill everyone and sacrifice the power of Nie Tian and the others to it. At the same time, he would absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves. But now, Lien Jiufeng and Nie Tian were out of his control. He could only absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves first. Boom! 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 At this time, there was a thunderous roar. Blazing white spheres of light appeared on 7 kills and the others. This was the power of Wolf Dawn. The Netherworld Emperor used the power of the Great Formation of Heaven Punishing 9 to forcefully remove the power of the Dawn of Wolves from 7 kills and the others. Steal the Dawn of Wolves! Lien Jiufeng's eyes shook. He growled and charged toward the Dawn of Wolves like a ball of fire. At the same time, Nie Tian also moved. He stretched out his hand, and sword intent surged madly, forming a net of sword intent that enveloped him. 8 wolves, how many can you snatch? At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out like thunder. Immediately, the blood-colored tentacles in the air went berserk, grabbing at Nie Tian and blazing 9-fold. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he forcefully released a wave of dragon chi to block the blood-colored tentacles. Then, he grabbed with his hand and grabbed Lang Chen. On the other side, Lien Jiufeng unleashed the power of golden flames from all over his body. A ball of flames howled as it shot towards Lang Chen. He actually wanted to directly destroy Wolf Dawn's power. However, after the ball of flames fell, not only did it not destroy Lang Chen, but it also pushed Lang Chen towards the Emperor of the Underworld. Lien Jiufeng had underestimated Lang Chen's strength. It was impossible for him to destroy Lang Chen with his current strength. Idiot! Nie Tian abruptly turned around and scolded Lien Jiufeng angrily. Lien Jiufeng frowned and moved again. He was just about to grab the other Wolf Chen when a bloody tentacle grabbed him. Damn it! Lien Jiufeng growled. The flames on his body went berserk and shattered the bloody tentacle. The Emperor of the Underworld was terrifying, but he could no longer unleash the true power of the great sacrificial formation of Heaven Punishing 9 under the torture of the extreme killing soul-killing technique. In the next moment, Lien Jiufeng moved and forcibly grabbed a Wolf Chen. However, when he looked around, he discovered that all the Wolf Chen had disappeared. He abruptly turned around to look at Nie Tian. The latter had 2 Wolf Chen in his hand. The Emperor of the Underworld had absorbed the remaining 5 Wolf Chen. Oh no! Lien Jiufeng cried out. Then, he looked at the Emperor of the Underworld with a tremble in his eyes. The terrifying heaven-punishing demonic energy roiled around the Emperor of the Underworld's body. The power of 5 Wolf Chen surrounded the demonic energy, making it look even more dazzling. Screw it! Lien Jiufeng's pupils contracted. He roared and unleashed the power of golden flames from his body. He took a step forward and tried to attack. Wait! But it was at this moment Nie Tian let out a low roar and moved to block Lien Jiufeng's path. Lien Jiufeng was stunned. He looked at Nie Tian and asked, "What is it?" Nie Tian frowned. A sword intent surged out of his palm and surged toward the Emperor of the Underworld. The sword intent was devoured by the heaven-punishing demonic energy the moment it approached the Emperor of the Underworld. This! Lien Jiufeng couldn't help but gasp when he saw this. His expression froze. If Nie Tian hadn't stopped him, the heaven-punishing demonic energy around the Emperor of the Underworld would have devoured him instantly. Lien Jiufeng, I told you that you can't kill me! The Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out. The heaven-punishing demonic energy around his body grew even more turbulent, and the heaven-punishing gate appeared behind him once more. How is this possible? Lien Jiufeng's eyes trembled when he saw this. He was absolutely shocked. He hadn't thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would still be able to summon the heaven-punishing gate at a time like this. Nie Tian, Lien Jiufeng, we will meet again. The Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out once more. He moved and stepped into the heaven-punishing gate. His figure disappeared. The power of 5 wolves actually disappeared along with him. Only the heaven-punishing demonic energy and the abyss-like heaven-punishing gate were left in the air. It was as if the heaven-punishing gate had opened a space-time passageway and allowed the Emperor of the Underworld to enter another space. Nie Tian and Lien Jiufeng were dumbfounded. They couldn't speak for a long time. Just what kind of trick did the Emperor of the Underworld use to escape with the heaven-punishing gate? It was unexpected that such a thrilling battle would end in such a manner. A long time later, Nie Tian and Lien Jiufeng calmed down a little. They exchanged a strange look with each other. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He started checking on Lan Zhuiying and the others. Lan Zhuiying and the others were unconscious, but their auras were stable. They seemed to have recovered. The Emperor of the Underworld had stripped them of the power of the wolves and allowed them to regain their consciousness. Nie Tian carefully placed Lan Zhuiying and the others on the ground and waited for them to wake up. Meanwhile, Lien Jiufeng was staring at the demonic energy whirlpool in the air. His eyes trembled slightly and shone with unconcealable heat. The heaven-punishing gate had disappeared. The violent demonic energy had condensed into a black whirlpool that radiated an extremely dark aura. Lien Jiufeng, you aren't thinking about the heaven-punishing demon heart, are you? Nie Tian frowned and asked Lien Jiufeng. The demonic energy whirlpool was the heaven-punishing demon heart that had been stripped from the Emperor of the Underworld. Lien Jiufeng seemed to be very interested in the heaven-punishing demon heart. Can't I? The corner of Lien Jiufeng's mouth twitched. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Nie Tian's expression darkened. He watched as the demonic energy whirlpool gradually stabilized. It seemed that the bloodline power it had absorbed earlier was slowly dissipating. Chapter 3601. Vicious and merciless Lien Jiufeng looked at the heaven-punishing demon heart with undisguisable passion as he said this. The heaven-punishing demon heart was right in front of him. How could he not be tempted? Moreover, the heaven-punishing demon heart would immediately return to its original state after losing its master. This was the best time to fuse with the demon heart. Lien Jiufeng, do you really want to fuse with the heaven-punishing demon heart? Nie Tian looked at Lien Jiufeng and frowned. He became much more cautious. Can't I? Lien Jiufeng's eyes darkened slightly. He looked coldly at Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, can you still stop me with your current strength? Nie Tian's eyes focused slightly. He did not plan to stop Lien Jiufeng. He had no interest in the heaven-punishing demon heart. He only wanted to know how to unseal Cher's memories. Nie Tian, I know what you are thinking. At this moment, Lien Jiufeng smiled faintly as a blood-red jade appeared in his hand. He tossed it to Nie Tian and said, This is the 3 lives blood soul jade. It can help Shui recover her memories. Nie Tian caught the 3 lives blood soul jade and focused slightly. Then, he probed it with his consciousness and felt the presence of the meridian of 3 lives. However, he was still worried. He frowned and asked, How can I trust you? I, Lien Jiufeng, may not be a good person, but I still have integrity. Lien Jiufeng laughed and said, Also, Cher recovering her memories is not bad for me. On the contrary, the person I need to worry about is you. If I were you, I wouldn't allow Shui to regain her memories. I'd let her stay by your side and be your Shui dutifully. Isn't that good? I do not need you to teach me how to do things. Nie Tianling said coldly. He wanted to see the complete Cher. Even if Cher really left him after she recovered her memory, he wouldn't regret it. After all, it was Cher's own choice. You are more open and forthright than I am, but this is your greatest weakness. Lai Yin-Zhufeng sneered and said, with your talent, if you were a little more ruthless, your current strength would be even more terrifying. How I choose is my own business. You just take care of yourself. Nie Tianling responded coldly. Then, he put away the 3 lives blood soul jade and said, the heaven-punishing demon heart is yours. However, I have to remind you that the Underworld Emperor is not dead yet. Is he still the Emperor of the Netherworld after losing the heaven-punishing devil heart? Lai Yin-Zhufeng smiled wickedly. His eyes were filled with arrogance and confidence. Once he merged with the heaven-punishing demon heart, would he still be afraid of the Emperor of the Underworld? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He didn't think that the Emperor of the Netherworld would become very weak after losing the heaven-punishing demon heart. After all, before the Emperor of the Netherworld left, he had taken away 5 wolf geniuses. Wolf geniuses were the sacred relic of the celestial wolf race. No one could predict how strong 5 wolf geniuses would be. Moreover, Nie Tian had a vague feeling that the Emperor of the Netherworld's disappearance from the heaven-punishing gate was not as simple as it seemed. In any case, he had no interest in the heaven-punishing demon heart. If Lai Yin-Zhufeng wanted it, he could just give it to him. Nie Tian. At this time, a weak voice sounded. Nie Tian suddenly turned around and saw that Su Kuanga had woken up. You're fine now. Don't move around. Recover your strength first. Nie Tian took a step forward and made Su Kuanga sit. Nie Tian, what happened? Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes. He seemed a little lost. We'll talk about it after we get out. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He looked at the others and prepared to leave after everyone had recovered a little. The Emperor of the Netherworld was dead, but Lai Yin-Zhufeng was still alive. He should know the exit of the Celestial Wolf Path. Save me. Then, another weak voice sounded. It was intermittent and sounded very weak. Nie Tian frowned. The person who had woken up was 7 kills. 7 kills had used the extreme killing soul killing move, but he was still alive. 7 kills, I didn't think you'd still be alive. Lai Yin-Zhufeng was stunned. Then, his eyes flashed with cold killing intent as he looked at 7 kills. He didn't think that 7 kills would still be alive after using the extreme killing soul killing move. The extreme killing soul killing move was 7 kills bloodline taboo move. Once it was used, he should have died for sure. Perhaps his martial body had absorbed some of Profound Star's power after he was possessed by Xianqin. That was why he was still alive. Save me. 7 kills' eyes trembled. He looked at Lai Yin-Zhufeng with pain and desire. He stretched out a hand as if he wanted to grab onto the last straw of hope. Heaven-punishing demon heart! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in his heart. Right now, 7 kills was on his last breath. If he was allowed to merge with the heaven-punishing demon heart, he would definitely survive. But with Lai Yin-Zhufeng around, he would not allow 7 kills to merge with the heaven-punishing demon heart. 7 kills, you want to kill the Emperor of the Underworld and avenge your clansmen. Lai Yin-Zhufeng's eyes flashed wickedly. He walked over to 7 kills and said, I will help you fulfill your last wish. Last wish? Nie Tian frowned when he heard Lai Yin-Zhufeng's words. His expression changed. Have a safe journey, 7 kills. In the next moment, Lai Yin-Zhufeng's eyes flashed coldly. He extended a hand and slammed it down on 7 kills' head. Bang! A muffled cracking sound could be heard. Qi Sha didn't even have time to react before the top of his head exploded. His eyes suddenly became sluggish. His supreme killer demon eyes trembled for a moment before they stiffened and lost their color of life in an instant. Before he died, his eyes were still looking at the heaven-punishing devil heart. He was looking at the last sliver of hope for survival. His eyes were filled with a mixture of desire and despair. As the palm fell, it suddenly stopped. Lai Yin Jiufeng, you. The sudden scene caused Nie Tian's eyes to tremble. He looked at Lai Yin Jiufeng, but he couldn't say anything for a time. He hadn't thought that Lai Yin Jiufeng would be so ruthless as to kill 7 kills without hesitation. 7 kills was born from the heaven-punishing demon heart with him. From a certain perspective, the two of them were related by blood. Moreover, they had fought side by side many times in the past. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were best friends. But Lai Yin Jiufeng was actually willing to kill a companion like this. Everything happened so suddenly that Nie Tian couldn't react in time. 7 kills was willing to sacrifice himself to take revenge on the Emperor of the Underworld. But after he did all that, Lai Yin Jiufeng actually killed him with his own hands. The viciousness of Lai Yin Jiufeng's heart was evident. Boom! Then, a ball of fire surged out of Lai Yin Jiufeng's palm and burned 7 kills. There was only a pile of ashes on the ground. 7 kills' aura was gone. Chapter 3602. The Heart of the World. Lai Yin Jiufeng's gaze was dark. Golden flames surged in his eyes, but his pupils were as deep as the abyss. They were filled with bottomless darkness. Does your martial path consist of killing your companions? Nie Tian's expression was dark, and his eyes were filled with undisguisable anger. He said coldly, "If the path of martial must be built on the bones of my companions, then I don't mind walking this path. The world of martial Tao has always been one where the strong are revered. The hands of those who stand at the peak of the martial Tao are stained with blood," Lai Yin Jiufeng said coldly. "How many people did the Emperor of the Netherworld kill? How much blood did he have on his hands? So, you want to become the next Emperor of the Netherworld?" Nie Tian's expression was cold, and his eyes flashed slightly. "Is there anything wrong with me wanting to become stronger?" Lai Yin Jiufeng sneered. His eyes were filled with cold arrogance. "Are you willing to do anything to become stronger?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly as he asked coldly. "The path of the strong has always been a bloody one. I will kill anyone who stands in my way." Lai Yin Jiufeng's expression was dark. He was like an iceberg, and he radiated a bone-chilling coldness. "Our paths are different. I hope we don't meet again," Nie Tian said coldly with a frown. "If you help Cher recover her memories, we will definitely meet again." Lai Yin Jiufeng's lips curled into an evil smile. Then, he tossed a scroll to Nie Tian and said, "This is the map of the path of the Heavenly Wolf. You can leave now." Nie Tian accepted the map and did not say anything. He opened it and checked it. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he prepared to leave. At this time, Lan Zhuiying and the others woke up. They looked at Nie Tian and Lai Yin Jiufeng in confusion. They did not know what had happened. "I'm going to leave this place now. Those who want to leave can come with me. Those who don't, I won't force you." Nie Tian glanced at the others and said coldly. Everyone recovered a little and stood up. Although they didn't say anything, they all came to stand behind Nie Tian. They obviously wanted to leave with Nie Tian. No one wanted to stay in this damned place any longer. Nie Tian no longer hesitated and headed straight for the exit of the canyon. "Nie Tian." It was at this moment Lai Yin Jiufeng suddenly called out to him. "Is there anything else?" Nie Tian paused for a moment, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he spoke in a cold tone. "Remember my words. If Cher recovers her memories, you'll regret it," Lai Yin Jiufeng said solemnly. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything and directly left. He had made up his mind long ago. No matter what Lai Yin Jiufeng said, he would not change his mind. Nie Tian followed the map and quickly found the exit of the Celestial Wolf Road. The moment they walked out of the Celestial Wolf Road, everyone let out a breath of turbid air. Their tensed faces relaxed. "Nie Tian, what happened in the Celestial Wolf Road? Why did our strength increase so much?" At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but ask. Nie Tian didn't hide anything and told them about how they were possessed by Langqin. So it's like this. Everyone was shocked and couldn't react for a long time. So they had been possessed and stimulated by Lang Chen's power, which was why their strength increased so much. But now, after Lang Chen's power left their bodies, their consciousness had recovered, but their martial bodies were a little weak compared to their current strength. Their auras were a little weak, and their realms were very unstable. After you return, it's best if you cultivate in seclusion, improve your martial bodies, and stabilize your realms. Nie Tian's gaze swept across everyone and said indifferently, Nie Tian, thank you. Lan Zhuing's beautiful eyes flickered as she said indifferently. Nie Tian nodded and smiled with a calm expression. Nie Tian, thank you. Yin Liujie and the others had ugly expressions. After hesitating for a moment, they still went forward to thank him. There was some conflict between them and Nie Tian, but in the Celestial Wolf Road, Nie Tian had truly saved their lives. If not for Nie Tian, they would have already become sacrifices under the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifices. And in the end, if not for Nie Tian, Lai Yen Jiufeng probably wouldn't have let them leave. Nie Tian, your injuries are not light. Why don't you return to the Su family with me first? At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and invited him warmly. All right. Nie Tian thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He was currently in a very bad state. If he left immediately, it was indeed not very safe. He had to rest for a few days before leaving. Brother Su, I also want to stay in your residence for a few days. I wonder if I have the honor? Ing Tsangqiong suddenly looked at Su Kuanga and asked with a smile. Of course. Su Kuanga laughed. His gaze swept across everyone present and said, If you want to come, the Su family also welcomes you. Bodhiseed, Yin Liujie and the others did not show any interest and left one after another. Nie Tian, you and I are both people who possess the heart of heaven and earth. We will meet again. Before leaving, Bodhiseed looked at Nie Tian and said solemnly. Nie Tian's gaze slightly froze. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. However, before he could ask anything, the Bodhi-seed had already left. Lan Zhuing stayed behind and was willing to go with Nie Tian to the Su family. Half a day later, under Su Kuanga's lead, Nie Tian, Lan Zhuing and Ing Tsangqiong arrived at the Su residence. Su Kuanga asked the servants to arrange a room for Nie Tian and the others, so that Nie Tian and the others could settle down in peace. In the room, Nie Tian sat cross-legged. The 9 extremes war god art slowly circulated within his body. Waves of energy flowed through his body, and the wounds all over his body began to slowly heal. His previous injuries were too heavy. Although the wounds on the outer layer of his skin had healed, there were some near-fatal injuries in his body that had not fully recovered. About a day later, his injuries had mostly recovered. Next, he began to thoroughly examine his martial body. On this trip to the Heavenly Wolf Road, he could be considered to have gained a lot. He could be considered to have understood some things about the Emperor of the Underworld. Moreover, he had also obtained the strongest power of the 9 great wolf stars. After he fused with the power of the Emperor's star, his strength directly broke through to the 8th level of Heavenly Yun Realm, and his martial body had also improved a lot. Faintly, he felt that the power of the Emperor's star had a deeper impact on his martial body, but he had not yet discovered it. At this time, Nie Tian was even more interested in the Heart of the Sky. He really wanted to know what kind of power the Heart of the Sky was. The Bodhi child said that we are all people who possess the heart of the heaven and earth. What does this mean? He recalled the words of the Bodhi child before he left and could not help but frown. The heart of the sky, it seemed that Nie Tian's heart of the sky, the Bodhi child's Bodhi Buddha heart, and the Emperor of the Underworld's heaven-punishing devil heart were all heart of the heaven and earth. Nie Tian did not know what the heart of the heaven and earth was and how many heart of the heaven and earth were there in this world. Then, Nie Tian took out the sky sword and could not help but frown as he looked at it with a strange expression. Also, What is the sword of the sky that was born from the heart of the sky? He almost did not know anything about the heart of the sky. Chapter 3603. Chapter 3598. Sword formation in the sky. What is this? Nye Tian looked at the sword in the sky and suddenly realized that it was densely covered with tiny runes that looked very strange, as if they were engraved on the body of the sword. Nye Tian couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He found that those exquisite magical symbols seemed to contain endless changes, and were extremely mysterious. He used his divine sense to explore the sword in the sky and felt as if he was in a boundless world of sword intent. Around him, illusory sword shadows floated and rotated in the void, drawing countless strange sword techniques in the air. These sword techniques were very strange, and Nye Tian had never seen them before. Every move of the sword techniques looked extremely clumsy, but as they rotated, they gave off a feeling of floating clouds and flowing water, as if they were endless. After a long time, Nye Tian withdrew his divine sense and found that his forehead was covered in beads of sweat. He had consumed a lot of mental strength when he was sensing the sword technique. What kind of power is contained in the sword in the sky? Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly as he looked at the sword in the sky in his hand in shock. Nye Tian, this should be a sword formation. At this moment, while Nye Tian was still in a state of shock, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out. A sword formation? Nye Tian frowned. His eyes flickered with astonishment, and he was taken aback. It was hard to imagine that a sword contained a sword formation. Nye Tian, try to deduce it and see if your sword intent can activate the sword formation. The Ghost Emperor spoke again with a fiery expression and seemed very excited. Nye Tian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. After nodding, he used his divine sense to enter the sword in the sky and the world of sword intent once again. At this moment, he began to release his sword intent, merging it with the sword intent in the surrounding space. Then, according to the illusory sword style, he slowly deduced it bit by bit. In the beginning, Nye Tian's movements were very slow. Those seemingly clumsy sword moves were rather difficult to deduce. Later, after deducing it several times, his speed became faster and faster, and the sword intent in the surrounding space also began to flow along with his sword intent, surging along with it. There is indeed the aura of the array intent. At this moment, Nye Tian felt the aura of a formation coming from the void. His expression changed slightly and he was extremely surprised. He could sense the power of the formation in the air, and its aura was getting stronger and stronger. It seemed like the Ghost Emperor was right. The runes on the sky sword were a sword formation. Nye Tian managed to maintain his composure and began to focus even more on sensing the surging sword wills in the surrounding space. However, the more he concentrated, the more he realized that the power contained in this world of sword intent far exceeded his imagination. He was simply unable to believe that the clear sky sword actually contained such terrifying power. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Nye Tian repeatedly deduced thousands of sword styles in the sky sword. As his sword styles continued to change, sword runes began to appear in the space, and a tremendous aura circulated, giving off a magnificent feeling. The first sword formation, go! At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly let out a deep roar, as he executed the last move in his hand. Suddenly, the space around him shook violently, and a tremendous force of the sword formation was unleashed, impacting the void. Bang! At this moment, an enormous sword formation appeared in the void, with the power of runes circulating wildly. It was mysterious and enormous. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and his eyes burned with passion. He could sense the tremendous power contained in the sword formation. The runes were extremely clear, and emitted a sense of immortality and mystery. This was the first sword formation that Nye Tian had inscribed from the sky sword. The sky sword contained endless sword intent, and Nie Tian's understanding of sword intent and sword styles allowed him to inscribe the first sword formation. Nie Tian withdrew his divine sense from the clear sky sword. His eyes, however, were staring at the clear sky sword in his hand with incomparable fervor. He saw an extremely small speck of light appear on the clear sky sword. It was as if a bright island had appeared in the sea of countless symbols. This bright place was the sword formation that Nie Tian had inscribed. The sword formation has appeared on the sky sword. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and his expression became sluggish. He did not expect that the sword formation he had inscribed would directly appear on the sky sword. This was a little similar to the time when he inscribed his astral souls. The excitement he felt was indescribable. Nie Tian, the sky sword contains endless sword formations. What you have inscribed is only one of the tens of thousands of sword formations, the Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice. This. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he could not speak for a long time. The sword array that he had spent 3 days to inscribe, on the clear sky sword, was only an almost invisible speck of light. It was hard to believe just how enormous was the sword array contained on the clear sky sword. Nie Tian, these sword formations are extremely profound. Even I can't comprehend them. The Ghost Emperor's voice continued. I'm guessing that the sword formation on the sky sword is a complete sword formation. However, this sword formation can be separated into countless smaller sword formations. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nie Tian was stunned once again, and his face turned numb. He had spent 3 days to inscribe a tiny light spot on the sword formation in the sky sword. If the entire sword formation in the sky sword was a complete sword formation, it was hard to imagine how powerful it would be. Nie Tian, give it a try and see if you can activate the sword formation. The Ghost Emperor's eyes flickered, and he said to Nie Tian excitedly. All right. Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he reacted. He nodded his head heavily, and with a thought, he activated the sword formation on the sky sword. Boom! Just at this moment, the clear sky sword suddenly released an enormous aura of sword intent. Immediately after, an enormous sword aura soared into the sky, like a huge dragon, violently attacking. Rumble! In the next instant, the room that Nie Tian was in was struck by the sword intent and collapsed. High up in the sky, the Su family's protective formation was also impacted, and it was on the verge of collapsing. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his face darkened. He used his divine sense to withdraw the sword formation. His eyes trembled, and after a while, he murmured, I didn't expect the power of the sword formation to be so strong. The Su family was considered a powerful force in the Wolf's Night Mountain. Although the protective formation wasn't too strong, it was definitely a rank 3 or rank 4 sacred formation. He didn't expect that the sword formation that Nie Tian had spent 3 days to inscribe would almost destroy the Su family's protective formation. Chapter 3604. Chapter 3599. Chapter 359. Returning late. What happened? After a while, the guards of the Su family appeared. Dozens of figures looked at Nie Tian in astonishment. They did not know what was going on in front of them. Sorry, I made a mistake and destroyed the house. Nie Tian smiled awkwardly and nodded. These guards knew that Nie Tian was Su Kuanga's friend, so they did not say anything and dispersed. Then, Su Kuanga, Lan Zhuing, Ing Tsangqiong and the others appeared. They were speechless when they saw the embarrassed Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled faintly with a helpless expression. Su Kuanga and the others did not immediately go into seclusion, but waited for Nie Tian to recover. Su Kuanga, sorry to disturb you for the past few days. My strength has recovered, it's time to leave. Nie Tian turned around and looked at the destroyed house, then bid farewell to Su Kuanga. He had been in Wolf's Night Mountain for some time, it was time to leave. Nie Tian, where are you going next? Su Kuanga frowned and asked reluctantly. I should go with him. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he looked at Ing Tsangqiong. He already knew that Ing Tsangqiong was a member of the 5 forces behind the Heart of Sky. It was time for Nie Tian to go back and give an explanation to the 5 forces. Nie Tian, are you really going with me? Ing Tsangqiong's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Nie Tian to leave with him so easily. The reason why he appeared in Wolf's Night Mountain was for the Heart of Sky. And the 5 forces behind the Heart of Sky, there were too many people who wanted the Heart of Sky. If Nie Tian went like this, he would inevitably be in danger. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly, I'll have to face it sooner or later. Before he had entered the Saint's world, Zhong Mingyu had told him that meeting the people of the 5 organizations would definitely be dangerous. But now that he had fused with the Heart of the Sky and the title of the Lord of the Sky, he had to face all of this. All he could do was make the 5 great factions accept him. All right, I'll bring you to the Qiankuan Gate. Ing Tsangqiong looked at Nie Tian and finally nodded. During this period of time, he had gained some understanding of Nie Tian. Regardless of what the other 5 forces thought, Ing Tsangqiong had already accepted Nie Tian's identity as the Master of the Sky. He even believed that Nie Tian had the ability to reunite the 5 major forces, which had already fallen apart. However, he still felt that Nie Tian seemed to be in too much of a hurry to meet the people from the 5 great forces now. Nie Tian, we will meet again. Su Kuanga knew that he could not keep Nie Tian, so he calmly smiled and said, We definitely will. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I hope we can have a good fight the next time we meet. I hope so. Su Kuanga nodded with a smile, but the corner of his mouth was somewhat bitter. He knew that his talent was not as good as Nie Tian's. The next time they met, Nie Tian's strength would probably far surpass his. He could only hope that he would not be left too far behind by Nie Tian. Ah, I forgot about that little girl. At this moment, Nie Tian was about to leave, but he suddenly thought of someone and could not help but cry out. Su Kuanga and the others were stunned, not knowing what had happened. Nie Tian was embarrassed. He immediately took out the 9 Extreme and let Ningxiu out. Nie Tian. Ningxiu came out of the 9 Extreme like a beast that had been locked in a cage for a long time. She cried out, her voice was rather sharp and piercing. I will send you home now. Nie Tian's face was ugly as he forced a smile. He had been too nervous during this period of time. Ever since he entered the Wolf's Night City, he had not relaxed. Even after arriving at the Su clan, he had been recovering his body. Later, because he was too excited about the sword formation in the sky, he temporarily forgot about Ningxiu. Go back now. Immediately. Immediately. Ningxiu was like a crazy little tiger as she shouted, If I miss the clan selection, I will not forgive you. Nie Tian had a helpless expression and could only nod at the side. Then, Nie Tian did not stay any longer. After getting Ing Tsangqiong's permission, he decided to send Ningxiu back to the Ning clan before going to the Qiankuan sect. What surprised Nie Tian was that Lan Zhuiying actually took the initiative to go with him. He did not want to agree at first, but Lan Zhuiying was very insistent. He had no choice but to agree. As for Lan Zhuiying, Nie Tian could not see through her. Her identity was very mysterious and she was very strong. Nie Tian could not understand why a woman like Lan Zhuiying would want to follow him. He would never deliberately think badly of a person, but he would never trust a person easily either. At least for now, he still could not treat Lan Zhuiying as a trustworthy friend. Next, Su Kuanga helped Nie Tian and the others arrange a flying beast. Then, the 4 of them directly left the Wolf's Night Mountain and headed for the 1,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce branch in the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. Along the way, Ningxiu kept asking Nie Tian what had happened over the past few days. Perhaps she could not accept that Nie Tian's strength had increased so quickly and that he was about to become a peak holy disciple. Nie Tian was really annoyed by the questions, so he called Duanmulu and the others out and gave Ning Ziyu to them. Ing Sangqiong had a strange look on his face. Obviously, he did not expect that there would be so many people around Nie Tian. About 5 days later, Nie Tian and the others arrived outside a magnificent ancient city. Above the city gate there was an incomparably powerful character engraved. Ning. This city was the Thousand Treasures Chamber of Commerce branch in the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. The simple character Ning represented the absolute authority of the Ning family in this city. It's here. Ning Ziyu looked at the huge city below. While she was excited, there was also a bit of worry on her face. She said, I wonder if the family selection is over. Nie Tian originally did not want to enter the city and planned to let Ning Ziyu enter the city alone. However, the latter was unwilling and insisted on him accompanying her. Nie Tian was somewhat helpless. At the same time, he was also worried about Ning Ziyu's safety, so he followed her into the city. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others arrived outside the Ning residence. With Ning Ziyu leading the way, the guards of the Ning residence naturally did not dare to stop them. Eldest Miss, you're finally back? Just as they entered the residence, a gray-robed old man walked over. When he saw Ning Ziyu from afar, his eyes trembled and he cried out in surprise. Uncle Fu! Ning Ziyu saw the old man and cried out in joy. She quickly walked over and anxiously asked, Has the family selection started? Sigh, it's already over. Uncle Fu sighed and said, The 3 candidates have already been decided. Eldest Miss, you're late. This. Ning Ziyu was stunned. Her entire body froze and did not react for a long time. It seemed that the Ning family selection was very important to her. Nie Tian looked at Ning Ziyu and frowned. He quickly walked to Uncle Fu's side and said, Uncle Fu, please bring us to the main hall. You are. Uncle Fu looked at Nie Tian and was shocked by the latter's aura. His expression froze and he was quite frightened. Uncle Fu, he's my friend. Bring us to the main hall first. Ning Ziyu calmed down and said in a deep voice. Yes, Uncle Fu replied and immediately brought Nie Tian and the others to the Ning residence's main hall. 19th Sister. Just as they arrived outside the main hall, a familiar voice was heard. Then, a figure flew out from the main hall. Chapter 3605. Is this a joke? Nie Tian looked at the person in front of him. His gaze instantly turned gloomy, and a chilling intent surged in his eyes. Ning Zifeng's eyes flickered slightly as he looked at Nie Tian. He seemed somewhat vigilant, and his expression was very ugly. Nie Tian already knew that he wanted to kill Ning Ziyu. If it weren't for Nie Tian, Ning Ziyu would have already died in his hands. He didn't expect that Nie Tian and Ning Ziyu would actually come back at this time. Ziyu. At this moment, a slightly excited voice rang out. Then, a figure rushed out from the hall. The instant he saw Ning Ziyu, his eyes blazed with excitement. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. It was a middle-aged man dressed in luxurious clothes. He looked elegant and dignified, but his loss of composure made him lack the dignity that he should have. Father! Ning Ziyu looked at the middle-aged man and couldn't help but call out in a low voice. This middle-aged man was none other than her father, the president of the Thousand Treasures Chamber of Commerce's 7 Cultivators of True Virtue branch, Ning Mingyuan. Ziyu, are you all right? Where have you been all this time? Ning Mingyuan recovered slightly, and his eyes darkened. Although he was angry, his tone revealed unconcealable concern. I'm fine. Ning Ziyu nodded slightly. She looked very sad and said, I'm sorry, father. I came back late. It's good that you're back. Ning Mingyuan nodded heavily. Although he spoke casually, he couldn't conceal the disappointment in his heart. He was originally very optimistic about Ning Ziyu and hoped that she could pass the clan selection and enter a higher world. Ning Ziyu was very young and talented. If she could enter a higher world, it would undoubtedly be very beneficial for her future cultivation. Unfortunately, she came back too late. The clan selection had already ended, and she didn't know when such an opportunity would come again. At this moment, Ning Zifeng suddenly pointed at Nie Tian and said fiercely, "Father, this is the brat who kidnapped 19th sister." Nie Tian frowned and his face darkened. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. Ning Zifeng wanted to kill Ning Ziyu, but now he was framing Nie Tian, saying that Nie Tian had kidnapped Ning Ziyu. How could Nie Tian not be angry? "You kidnapped my daughter and still dare to appear in the Ning family. Brat, you really have guts." Ning Mingyuan abruptly stared at Nie Tian. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he released his qi, causing the surrounding space to tremble. After which, his qi gushed towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed again. He didn't dodge. Instead, he took a step forward, and the bluestone floor under his feet shattered. A surge of sword aura surged out and directly shattered Ning Mingyuan's aura. Ning Mingyuan took several steps back from the impact. After stabilizing himself, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable shock. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so strong that he could shatter his aura directly. After all, he was a 9th Heaven Mandate Saint Master, while Nie Tian was only at the 8th Heaven Mandate realm. How could Nie Tian block his aura? Nie Tian, your strength is actually... At this moment, Ning Zifeng looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but exclaim. His eyes were trembling as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. He was so scared that he couldn't even speak. "Zifeng, what's wrong?" Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened when he saw Ning Zifeng's reaction. Father, his strength." Ning Zifeng pointed at Nie Tian. His eyes were trembling and his teeth were chattering. He couldn't speak at all. Ning Mingyuan frowned and his expression darkened even more. He looked at Nie Tian with a hint of doubt. Nie Tian looked very young, but he was at the 8th Heaven Mandate realm. His talent was indeed shocking. However, this kind of talent shouldn't have frightened Ning Zifeng to the point where he couldn't speak. At this moment, Nie Tian took a step forward and said to Ning Zifeng with a faint smile, "What? Does my strength scare you?" "You impossible." Ning Zifeng's eyes were trembling. He took a few steps back subconsciously and exclaimed, "You can't be so strong. Absolutely impossible." "Zifeng, what's wrong?" Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened when he saw Ning Zifeng losing control. At this moment the others in the hall also walked out. There were a few young warriors among them. They were quite strong and should be the new generation geniuses of the Ning clan. A warrior in green clothes holding a folding fan caught Nie Tian's attention. That person looked to be around 20 years old. His real age should be very young as well. However, he was actually a 1st Heaven Mandate Realm Saint Master. His talent could be seen from this. Apart from that, there was also a gray-robed elder with a vigorous aura. He was actually not weaker than the Wolf Emperor of the demonic Moon Sky Wolf. He should be a Saint Lord Tianyi. At this moment, everyone looked at Ning Zifeng. They didn't know why the latter was acting so strangely. "Father, this kid is called Nie Tian. The last time I saw him, he was only at the 1st Heaven Mandate realm. But now, he's already at the 8th Heaven Mandate realm," Ning Zifeng said with a trembling voice after he forced himself to calm down. Ning Mingyuan frowned and his expression stiffened. The way he looked at Nie Tian clearly changed. He asked in a deep voice, "Zifeng, when was the last time you saw him?" More than a month ago." Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He seemed to be a little uncertain, or perhaps he was too nervous. "A month." Ning Mingyuan's eyes suddenly narrowed when he heard this. His face actually revealed some unconcealable fear. A warrior actually rose from the 1st Heaven Mandate realm to the 8th Heaven Mandate realm in a month. Was this really possible? Ning Mingyuan had heard that even the peak geniuses of the high-ranked sacred world needed several years or even decades to reach the Heavenly Mandate realm. But this silver-haired warrior in front of him only used a month. How could he believe this? Unless Nye Tian had an amazing encounter and obtained some kind of inheritance power. However, any warrior who obtained inheritance power had to go into seclusion to cultivate. But now, Nye Tian's aura was steady and his realm was stable. He didn't seem like a warrior whose strength rose in an instant. However, the aura of the two people behind him was a little unstable. It seemed that their martial bodies couldn't keep up after their strength rose sharply. In short, Ning Mingyuan couldn't believe that Nye Tian could raise his strength from the first Heaven Mandate realm to the 8th Heaven Mandate realm in a month. Ning Zifeng, this kid can raise his strength by 7 Heaven Mandate realms in a month? Are you kidding me? At this moment, the green-robed cultivator holding the folding fan, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. His voice was deep and his eyes were filled with disdain. Obviously, he also didn't believe that Nye Tian could raise his strength so quickly. Chapter 3606. Worse than a pig, young Master Chen, I'm not joking. Back in the City of Million Treasures, this brat was really only in the first layer of the Heavenly Charm realm. Ning Zifeng looked at the cultivator in green and couldn't help but panic. He looked at Ning Ziyu and said, 19th sister can testify as well. The cultivator in green, who was addressed as young Master Chen, narrowed his eyes and a cold look flashed in them. He looked at Ning Ziyu and asked, little girl, is what Ning Zifeng said true? Ning Ziyu's eyes flickered as if she was afraid. She couldn't help but look at Nye Tian. Ziyu, answer young Master Chen honestly. Ning Mingyuan's face darkened as he reprimanded coldly. He could tell that Ning Ziyu was very careful in front of Nye Tian. She seemed nervous, but this nervousness wasn't fear. Instead, it was trust. Ning Mingyuan couldn't help but feel doubtful. Did Nye Tian really kidnap Ning Ziyu? If that was the case, why did Ning Ziyu look at Nye Tian with trust and dependence? Just tell me the truth, Ning Ziyu. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. Ning Ziyu's eyes flickered as she looked at Ning Mingyuan and the others. She nodded slightly and said, Nye Tian's strength has indeed increased a lot, but he's not a bad person. He didn't kidnap me. He's my guard and has always been protecting me. Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled and his face went blank for a moment. He only heard the beginning of Ning Ziyu's sentence, but couldn't hear the rest of it. If Ning Zifeng was too nervous and saw wrongly, then how could Ning Ziyu's words be explained? Ning Ziyu had that kind of power. She couldn't have seen wrongly. Ning Mingyuan looked at Nye Tian in a daze. He couldn't believe that this young cultivator in front of him had actually increased his strength by 7 layers in a month. Such talent was probably enough to crush those monstrous geniuses in the high-ranked sacred world. At this moment, the cultivator in green had a gloomy expression and a hint of coldness surged in his eyes. He now believed what Ning Zifeng and his sister had said. However, this changed his attitude towards Nye Tian from contempt to anger. In his heart, Nye Tian was just an elementary sacred world cultivator and did not deserve to have such great talent. When he thought that the martial artist in front of him actually had talent that far surpassed his, he felt an inexplicable anger and even resentment. In the end, he still looked down on Nye Tian. You, what's your name? At this time, Ning Mingyuan suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. He looked at Nye Tian with a trembling gaze and asked in surprise. Nye Tian. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He had already guessed why Ning Mingyuan had suddenly become so panicked. Not long ago, in Wolf Knight City's Wolf Slave Farm, there was a second-level Heavenly Charm martial artist who successfully defeated a Heavenly Wolf. His name was also Nye Tian. Was it you? Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled and his voice changed as he stared at Nye Tian nervously. It was me. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, but his expression remained indifferent. The battle against the Heavenly Wolf had spread his name throughout the entire sacred world of 7 cultivators. It was not strange for Ning Mingyuan to suddenly think of this matter. It really was you. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled as he shouted in horror. When he heard that there was a martial artist who defeated a heavenly wolf called Nye Tian, he immediately thought of Nye Tian. However, at that time, he was not sure that the martial artist who defeated the heavenly wolf was the Nye Tian he knew. He only had some suspicions in his heart. Now that Nye Tian personally admitted it, how could he not be surprised? Back in Million Treasure City, he had only interacted with Nye Tian for a short time and did not understand how terrifying Nye Tian was. At this moment, he truly realized how terrifying Nye Tian was. At this time, Nye Tian took a step forward and said to Ning Mingyuan, "Lord Ning, I did not come here to show off my talent and strength. I simply came to escort Ning Ziyu back." This. Ning Mingyuan's expression stiffened and he was momentarily speechless. How could he have imagined that such a terrifyingly talented martial artist would actually become Ning Ziyu's bodyguard? Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered as she glanced at Nye Tian and said to Ning Mingyuan, "Father, Nye Tian entered the wolf slave farm to save me." Ning Mingyuan's expression sank as he roared like a wild beast. "You were captured by the wolf slave farm?" Ning Ziyu smiled faintly and looked at Nye Tian proudly. "I'm fine. It was all thanks to Nye Tian coming to save me." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything. Actually, Ning Ziyu escaped from the wolf slave farm on her own. He only saved her from those who were chasing after her. Even now, Nye Tian still couldn't figure out how Ning Ziyu managed to escape from the wolf slave farm. Thank you, Mr. Nye Tian." After a moment, Ning Mingyuan reacted and bowed slightly, sincerely apologizing to Nye Tian. "Father, Nye Tian is the one who kidnapped 19th sister." At this moment, Ning Zifeng, who was standing at the side, shouted anxiously, "Shut up!" Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened as he reprimanded Father, "Do you think I'm blind?" Ning Ziyu trusted Nye Tian so much that the look in her eyes could not be deceiving. "Ziyu, you went to the City of Million Treasure alone. Why didn't you come back with your fifth brother?" Ning Mingyuan seemed to have sensed something and asked with a frown. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled. She looked at Ning Zifeng and stammered without saying anything. "Ning Zifeng, what's going on?" As the president of a chamber of commerce, Ning Mingyuan was extremely shrewd. He immediately saw through the clues and his eyes turned cold. His gaze locked onto Ning Zifeng like a sharp knife. "Father, Ning Zifeng's eyes suddenly narrowed. His face froze in fear. His body was drenched in cold sweat, and he could not say a word. "Speak!" Ning Mingyuan's eyes were extremely cold as he roared. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He subconsciously retreated, completely speechless. "Since Ning Zifeng doesn't want to speak, let me do it." Nye Tian looked at Ning Zifeng, smiled faintly and said, "If my guess is correct, Ning Zifeng already wanted to kill Ning Ziyu back in the Ning clan. He first cast a curse on Ning Ziyu's flying mount. However, Ning Ziyu was very lucky and did not die when the flying mount suddenly went out of control. After that, in the City of Million Treasure, Ning Zifeng tried to kill Ning Ziyu several times, but he was unable to kill her. This brother tried to kill his own sister time and time again. Do you think Ning Ziyu could still follow him back to the Ning residence? After Nye Tian finished speaking, he stared at Ning Zifeng with a pair of gloomy and contemptuous eyes. A person who even wanted to kill his own sister was worse than a pig or a dog. "It's you, it's all because of you." The moment Nye Tian's words left his mouth, Ning Zifeng seemed to have gone mad as he suddenly started shouting. He pointed at Nye Tian and growled, "If it weren't for you, Ning Ziyu would have died long ago." Chapter 3607. Chapter 362. Being a dog at this moment, Ning Mingyuan was truly enraged. His eyes were deep and murderous, and they were suffused with a dark red color. He stared at Ning Zifeng with an unconcealable killing intent. He could not tolerate his son trying to kill his daughter. "Father, I. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. he immediately felt Ning Mingyuan's murderous intent and terrifying aura. His entire body went limp and he fell to the ground like a pile of mud. His lips trembled, but he could not say a word. "Bastard, how dare you kill your own sister?" Ning Mingyuan was enraged. His entire body was filled with rage and he raised his hand. As long as his palm landed, Ning Zifeng would definitely die on the spot. "Father, I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I beg you, please spare me." Ning Zifeng curled up and trembled. His voice was filled with tears and he looked extremely miserable. "If I spare you, what about the Ning family's rules?" Ning Mingyuan roared. Waves of energy began to gather on his palm. A furious aura gathered and was about to land in the next moment. "Third brother, ninth brother, help me plead for mercy." Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He suddenly looked at the two young warriors behind Ning Mingyuan and said, "Father." The two of them stepped forward and were about to speak but were interrupted by Ning Mingyuan. "No matter who pleads for mercy today, it's useless. I must kill this unfilial son." Ning Mingyuan roared like thunder. Violent energy flowed in his palm as he struck with a decisive palm. "Wait!" However, at this moment, a voice that was not loud but filled with majesty rang out, causing Ning Mingyuan's killing palm to stop in midair. Ning Zifeng felt a strong wind blowing past him, causing his heart to skip a beat. He felt his buttocks heat up and the stench of urine spread. He was so scared that he peed his pants. "Young Master Chen?" Ning Mingyuan retracted his palm and turned to look at the warrior in green who suddenly spoke. The warrior in green was called Ning Liangchen. He came from the main Ning family and was the host of the Ning family's selection this time. Originally, the day of the selection was over a month later. However, Ning Liangchen had arrived in advance. Thus, the selection was brought forward. Because Ning Liangchen was from the main family, and Ning Mingyuan was only a small branch of the Ning family, even Ning Mingyuan had to take Ning Liangchen's words seriously. "Ning Mingyuan, Ning Zifeng has been chosen by me. He will enter the main family soon." Ning Liangchen's eyes were cold as he looked at Ning Mingyuan playfully and said, "So, Ning Zifeng is now a member of the main family. Don't tell me you're going to kill people from the main house?" "Young Master Chen, you..." Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled as he looked at Ning Liangchen with an astounded expression because he never imagined that the latter would actually say this. That's right, Ning Zifeng had been chosen and was about to enter the main family. Even so, Ning Zifeng was still Ning Mingyuan's son. Moreover, Ning Zifeng hadn't been chosen before he made the mistake. Could it be that just because he was chosen that the matter of him wanting to kill Ning Ziyu was over just like that? "Ning Mingyuan, didn't you hear what I said clearly?" Ning Liangchen's lips twitched and his expression instantly darkened as he said Ning Mingyuan coldly. "I heard it clearly." Ning Mingyuan's expression stiffened, but he still nodded and said, "Since you heard it clearly, then back off." Ning Liangchen's eyes twitched as he reprimanded him coldly. Ning Mingyuan's expression was ugly, but he still backed off in the end. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. His expression was cold and stern. "Ning Zifeng, if you want to live, then from now on, you have to stay by my side obediently and be my dog. Are you willing?" At this moment, Ning Liangchen's lips twitched into a sinister smile as he looked at Ning Zifeng with a strange gaze. "Yes, I'm willing." Ning Zifeng immediately crawled over and said repeatedly like a real dog. "Very well." Ning Liangchen's lips twitched. His gaze roamed around Ning Mingyuan and the others, and he actually said, "Ning Zifeng, bark for me twice now." "Bark? How?" Ning Zifeng was stunned and a little confused. "Dog. Don't you know how a dog barks?" Ning Liangchen's gaze darkened as he said coldly. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled and his expression froze for a moment. However, when he saw Ning Liangchen's murderous gaze, he couldn't care about anything else and actually barked. "Woof! Woof woof woof! Zifeng, you!" Ning Mingyuan was stunned by the scene before him. He growled but couldn't say anything. The son he had raised was actually acting like a dog in front of someone else. Such a scene made him feel like a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was even more painful than killing Ning Zifeng with his own hands. Those barks were like sharp blades, stabbing into his heart again and again. "Fifth brother, get up quickly!" Ning Ziyu reacted at this moment and said loudly, "I'll tell father to forget about you killing me. Get up quickly!" However, Ning Zifeng kept barking and looked at Ning Liangchen cautiously at the same time. It was obvious that he was very afraid. Ning Mingyuan and the other two sons behind him had dark and ugly expressions. In order to survive, Ning Zifeng was even willing to be a dog. "Ning Mingyuan, you wanted to kill your son, but he became my dog. You must be feeling terrible right now, right?" Ning Liangchen smiled coldly and his expression was full of mockery. "Enough!" Ning Mingyuan couldn't take it anymore and growled. His eyes were filled with anger as he said in a deep voice, "Ning Liangchen, I'm your uncle after all. How can you humiliate me like this?" "Uncle?" Nie Tian's gaze trembled when he heard Ning Mingyuan's words, and his heart was filled with surprise. He originally thought that Ning Liangchen and Ning Mingyuan were from the same family. He didn't expect them to be so close. They were actually uncle and nephew. "Ning Mingyuan, so you still remember that you're my uncle? Then do you remember how my father died?" Ning Liangchen's eyes darkened as he stared at Ning Mingyuan with a murderous gaze. "I killed him." Ning Mingyuan's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. His voice instantly became softer. "That's right. You were the one who killed him. Do you think that I'm going overboard with how I'm treating your son right now?" Ning Liangchen laughed coldly. To everyone's surprise, he stepped out and stomped on Ning Zifeng's face. Ning Zifeng wanted to resist, but he realized that he couldn't. "Your father's death back then was an accident." Ning Mingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice, "An accident?" Ning Liangchen sneered and said, "I'd like to hear what kind of accident it was." Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, "Back then, your father cultivated a forbidden evil technique and killed thousands of his clansmen. I killed him because it was a family rule." Ning Liangchen's father was Ning Mingyuan's younger brother. However, he didn't follow the right path and cultivated an evil technique, killing thousands of his clansmen. Ning Mingyuan was ordered by the family to kill Ning Liangchen's father. Back then, even if Ning Mingyuan didn't do it, someone else would. Chapter 3608. A false accusation. Ning Liangchen lifted his leg and exerted all his strength. He could stomp Ning Zifeng to death with a single stomp. He was a first-tier Heavenly Mandate Realm warrior, while Ning Zifeng was only a third-tier Heavenly Mandate Realm warrior. No! The horrifying scene caused Ning Mingyuan's eyes to tremble, and he immediately cried out. Ning Liangchen's feet sank and then he froze in midair. After that, he looked at Ning Mingyuan with an extremely gloomy expression and said with a smile, "My lord uncle, didn't you want to kill this dog just now? Why are you reluctant to do it now that I'm enforcing the family rules for you?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled, and he was momentarily speechless. He did want to kill Ning Zifeng just now, but he hesitated for a long time before making up his mind. No matter what Ning Zifeng did, he was his son after all. "I'll kill my son myself." Ning Mingyuan's expression changed, and he said in a deep voice, "You want to kill him? I won't let you. Ning Zifeng is my dog now. You can't kill him." Ning Liangchen smiled coldly. "You!" Ning Mingyuan's expression froze. His eyes trembled like a wild beast that was about to go berserk. It was obvious that Ning Liangchen was making fun of him. Nie Tian's lips twitched. He looked at Ning Liangchen with a gloomy gaze. This person was a psychopath. "Ning Zifeng, I've saved your worthless life. Aren't you happy?" At this moment, Ning Liangchen suddenly laughed. His eyes flickered with an evil glow as he spoke with a ghastly voice. "Thank you, young Master Chen. Thank you, young Master Chen. Thank you, young Master Chen. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He was so scared that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He immediately kowtowed and said loudly, "Just this kind of thanks is far from enough." Ning Liangchen chuckled. "I'm asking you to do something now. You won't refuse, right?" "Of course not." Ning Zifeng nodded immediately. "Even if you ask me to do 100 or 1,000 things, I'll definitely do it." "All right." Ning Liangchen smiled faintly. His eyes turned cold as he looked at Ning Ziyu and pointed at her. "Now, kill her." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. They froze on the spot and were speechless for a long time. Who would have thought that Ning Liangchen would actually want Ning Zifeng to kill Ning Ziyu? Ning Zifeng was stunned. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. His face turned extremely ugly and he was speechless. "What, you're not willing?" Ning Liangchen frowned and his face turned extremely gloomy as he said, "Don't you want to kill her? This young master gave you this chance, but you don't dare?" Ning Zifeng's expression froze. He really wanted to kill Ning Ziyu previously, but now that he had been chosen, Ning Ziyu was no longer a threat to him, so there was no need for him to kill Ning Ziyu. Moreover, how could he kill Ning Ziyu in front of Ning Mingyuan? "Ning Zifeng, don't be afraid. With me here, no one will dare to stop you." At this moment, Ning Liangchen smiled cold and said, "Now, do it." "Ning Liangchen, have you had enough?" Ning Mingyuan could no longer hold it in. He roared furiously and released his aura like a wild beast. "What? Ning Mingyuan, are you trying to rebel?" However, Ning Liangchen was not intimidated by Ning Mingyuan at all. Instead, his expression darkened and he said cold, "With my current identity, I can kill whoever I want." "How dare you?" Ning Mingyuan roared in a low voice. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. "What do you think?" Ning Liangchen smiled evilly. He then took out a golden token and showed it to Ning Mingyuan. "This is..." Ning Mingyuan was shocked when he saw the token. He was stunned for a moment before he said, "A law enforcement token." "Ning Mingyuan, you're quite knowledgeable to know that this is a law enforcement token." Ning Liangchen laughed coldly and said, "When you killed my father all those years ago, you used such a command token, right?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled. He was speechless for a moment. He could not understand why Ning Liangchen would have a law enforcement token. Shouldn't law enforcement tokens only belong to the Ning clan's law enforcement hall? Moreover, under normal circumstances, people from the law enforcement hall would not casually show their law enforcement token unless it was necessary to enforce the law. Could it be? In the next moment, Ning Mingyuan suddenly thought of something. His expression changed, and his heart trembled inexplicably. His face was filled with extreme shock. "Ning Mingyuan, you're smart. You figured it out so quickly." Ning Liangchen smiled and said, "Your branch of 7 cultivators of true virtue has violated the Ning clan's rules. This time, I'm not only here to select 3 people to enter the main clan. I'm also here to handle matters for the Law Enforcement Hall." "What rule did my branch of 7 cultivators of true virtue break?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled as he roared. "I don't know about that. You should explain it to the people from the Law Enforcement Hall." Ning Liangchen smiled cold and turned to Ning Zifeng. "Now do it. Even if I broke the rules, what does it have to do with Ning Ziyu?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes darkened as he said cold. "Ning Ziyu disobeyed the Law Enforcement Hall's rules. I had no choice but to kill her. Is there a problem?" Ning Liangchen's eyes darkened as he said cold. "You..." Ning Mingyuan's eyes narrowed and he was speechless. He did not expect Ning Liangchen to be so arrogant as to frame him with his eyes wide open. At this moment, he wanted to make a move. However, the gray-robed old man next to him was staring at him. This gray-robed old man was at least a first-stage Heavenly Justice Great Sage. Ning Mingyuan was not his match at all. "Ning Zifeng, do it." At this moment, Ning Liangchen roared with boundless insolence. Ning Mingyuan and the others watched from the side. They wanted to make a move, but they did not dare to. Once they made a move, the gray-robed old man would make a move. By then, Ning Ziyu would not be the only one to die. Ning Zifeng stood up and tried to walk towards Ning Ziyu. Zifeng, are you crazy? Ning Mingyuan roared. The aura in his body surged continuously, and his eyes were bloodshot. Father, I don't want to die. Ning Zifeng shook his head and said. He stared at Ning Ziyu with murderous intent. He knew that if he did not kill Ning Ziyu, Ning Liangchen would definitely kill him. Scram! Right at this moment, a low roar sounded out. After that, a violent sword aura whistled out and blasted Ning Liangchen flying. Following that, a figure stepped out. Like a sharp sword and a mountain, he stood in front of Ning Ziyu. Huh! Ning Liangchen's eyes narrowed. He looked at Nye Tian cold and said in a deep voice, Brat, are you going against me? Chapter 3609. Chapter 364. Chapter 364. You gonna regret this. Nye Tian's voice wasn't loud, yet every single word he spoke was resolute and revealed a strand of resolution. Kid, this originally had nothing to do with you. Allow this young master to give you a piece of advice. It's best that you don't interfere. Ning Liangchen's gaze was murderous as he spoke in a cold and extremely threatening tone. What if I have to interfere? The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he lightly replied. His expression was very calm, but his eyes were like the abyss, as if hiding in extremely deep darkness, causing others to feel a strong sense of deterrence. Kid, do you know who I am? Ning Liangchen sensed the killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes, and his face couldn't help but sink as he said, This young master is acting on behalf of the Ning clan's enforcement hall. If you dare to obstruct this young master, then you're going against the Ning clan. A threat, a naked threat. Ning Liangchen directly used the entire Ning clan to threaten Nye Tian. I don't know who you are, and I don't know who you represent, Nye Tian said indifferently. All I know is that I'm Ning Ziyu's guard. Anyone who wants to touch her will have to ask the sword in my hand first. Buzz! As soon as he finished speaking, the sword of sky appeared in Nye Tian's hand. Instantly, the cry of the sword resounded in the air. It was clear and intense like a thunderclap, resounding through the air, and it was deafening. Ning Liangchen's eyes couldn't help but shake when he sensed the powerful and fierce aura within the sword insight, and he couldn't help but cry out in astonishment. Obviously, he had not expected Nye Tian's sword intent to be so terrifying. Young Master Chen, I'll deal with him. Meanwhile, the gray-robed old man behind Ning Liangchen suddenly took a step forward and spoke in a low voice. In that instant, he actually felt a real threat from Nye Tian's sword intent. One had to know that he was a powerhouse of the Tianyi Great Sage. A heavenly charm holy disciple actually made him feel threatened. This was too strange. Moreover, he sensed a very strange aura from Nye Tian's body. This aura made him feel somewhat uneasy, so he decided to personally take action. Ning Liangchen was the young master of the main family after all. It would be bad if something were to happen to him. Elder Jiang, you don't have to do anything. A mere heavenly charm saint disciple can't do anything to me. However, Ning Liangchen stopped the gray-robed old man at this moment. He seemed extremely arrogant as he looked at Nye Tian in disdain. He said, Brat, you're just a piece of trash from a primary saint world, yet you dare to oppose me? Don't attack me. You will regret it. Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he spoke coldly. That gray-robed old man by the name of Elder Jiang was simply too strong. Therefore, Nye Tian did not wish to really have a conflict with Ning Liangchen at this moment. But if Ning Liangchen insisted on making a move, then he would absolutely not hold back. Brat, you're too arrogant. Ning Liangchen's eyes darkened as he immediately flew into a rage. His aura surged crazily and a terrifying power surged. The space was filled with an extremely sharp aura. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. It seemed that Ning Liangchen had used the power of his bloodline. It was extremely strange. Brat, I only need one palm strike to defeat you. In the next instant, Ning Liangchen let out a furious roar as he struck out with his palm. In an instant, a horrifying palm shadow appeared as a terrifying pressure surged out from the void, crushing down on Nie Tian like tidal wave. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as his expression changed slightly. Afterwards, he took a step forward and his sword aura rose from the ground like a huge tree, directly dispersing the incoming palm shadow. Bang! Afterwards, a muffled sound rang out. Ning Liangchen was directly sent flying by the impact. He only managed to stabilize himself after retreating several dozen meters. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely miserable. How can this be? Ning Liangchen's eyes trembled as he let out a strange cry. His voice was extremely sharp. He was a heavenly mandate saint master. How could he lose to a heavenly mandate saint disciple? He didn't know that when Nie Tian was still a low-level saint disciple, he was already strong enough to fight against a heavenly mandate saint master. Now that Nie Tian was at the 8th level of heavenly mandate, he was strong enough to fight against a heavenly mandate saint master at the 5th level. Moreover, in such a narrow space, apart from the cultivation of a warrior, it was more about the warrior's martial body. Nie Tian's strength was at the 8th level of heavenly mandate, but the strength of his martial body was definitely not weaker than a warrior at the 8th level of heavenly mandate. Based on Nie Tian's strength, the strength of his martial body was simply like a monster. After all, there were several types of heaven-defying powers in his body that strengthened his martial body and made him extremely strong. Ning Mingyuan and the others were also stunned by the scene in front of them and couldn't react for a long time. Ning Mingyuan already knew that Nie Tian was a monstrous genius, but when he saw Nie Tian suppress Ning Liangchen head-on, he was still very shocked. I told you, don't attack me or you will regret it. Nie Tian's eyes were extremely gloomy and cold. Brat, you're courting death. Ning Liangchen was thoroughly enraged at this moment. With a roar, he unleashed an even more berserk power from his body. Surges of bloodline power circulated around his body, gradually condensing into a gigantic black beast that was several hundred meters in size. Nie Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes and his expression slightly changed when he saw this scene. The power that Ning Liangchen released was very strange. It seemed to be the power of the primordial spirit, but also the power of the bloodline. Young Master Chen. Old Jiang frowned when he saw Ning Liangchen release the dark giant beast, seemingly dissatisfied. 8 strange bloodline. At the same time, Ning Mingyuan looked at Ning Liangchen and his eyes trembled, as if he had seen something very terrifying. He couldn't help but exclaim, 8 strange bloodline? When Nie Tian heard this name, he could not help but be stunned for a moment as his expression changed slightly. Brat, go to hell! Right at this moment, Ning Liangchen roared out as he made his move. The gigantic black beast behind him roared out as it pounced out ferociously. Instantly, the pressure it exerted caused the surrounding space to sink down as though it was about to collapse. Nie Tian stood in the same spot and instantly felt the ferocious aura coming at him. However, his face showed no fear. Instead, his lips twitched slightly as he slashed the longsword in his hand across the sky. The sword intent around him was instantly unleashed, forming a shadow of a sword that slammed toward the dark giant beast. Boom! The shadow of the sword was extremely violent, instantly emitting a powerful aura. The sword light traveled tens of thousands of meters and landed directly on the dark giant beast. A loud explosion could be heard in the sky as the space seemed to freeze for a moment. Following this, the dark giant beast was unable to withstand the power of the sword intent and shattered into pieces. Bang! In the next moment, the shadow of the sword whizzed out and directly pressed toward Ning Liangchen. After a dull thud, Ning Liangchen was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. When he landed on the ground, countless pieces of the bluestone floor were shattered. The eyes of the crowd trembled as they gasped. They were completely shocked by the scene before them and were completely speechless. Chapter 36:10. Chapter 365. Chapter 365 8 Abnormalities. After a long time, Ning Mingyuan and the others finally reacted. Their faces were filled with shock that could not be concealed. Ning Mingyuan did not dare to believe that Ning Liangchen, who had activated the 8-variant bloodline, was actually defeated by Nie Tian with a single sword just like that. Ning Liangchen's own strength was already at the first tier of the Heavenly Mandate realm. After activating the 8 strange bloodlines, even an ordinary warrior at the 3rd tier of the Heavenly Mandate realm would be no match for him. However, under such circumstances, he was defeated by Nie Tian with a single strike. Even more shocking was that Nie Tian's sword strike from before seemed to be a casual strike, and he hadn't exerted his full strength at all. This made one wonder just how terrifying Nie Tian's battle prowess was. Master Chen. After a short moment, old Jiang reacted and shouted loudly. His figure flashed and arrived by Ning Liangchen's side with extreme astonishment. Ning Liangchen was someone who had activated the 8-variant bloodline. His status in the Ning family was not low. If he were to die, it would be a huge problem. At this moment, Ning Liangchen's entire body was drenched with blood. He was like a pile of mud as he lay paralyzed on the ground. He struggled with all his might with the intention of standing up. However, he discovered that he was unable to stand up no matter what. His appearance was as miserable could be. Master Chen. Old Zhang's eyes shook, and then a strand of saint energy surged out and entered into Ning Liangchen's body. Only then did the latter feel slightly better, and he stood up shakily. However, at this moment, the way he looked at Nie Tian was filled with unconcealable fear. His eyes were trembling, and he didn't even dare to look at Nie Tian directly. Old man Zhang's face was gloomy. He suddenly raised his head, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as they locked onto Nie Tian. "Don't worry, he won't die yet." Nie Tian smiled and said indifferently. Ning Liangchen's strength was pretty good. However, before him, he was completely unable to withstand a single blow. That sword strike earlier, if Nie Tian had used a little more force, Ning Liangchen would have died without a doubt. The reason why Nie Tian didn't kill Ning Liangchen was because he didn't want things to go to the extreme. "Little brat, do you know who you've injured?" Old Zhang's face darkened. His eyes were filled with cold intent and he asked coldly. "He attacked first." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. "I warned him not to attack me, but he didn't listen. I can't just stand there and let him kill me." Elder Zhang's face darkened as he said, "Brat, do you know that I can kill you right now just because you injured a member of the Ning family? Is that so?" Nie Tian faintly smiled. His eyes flickered as he said, "Then what are you waiting for? You." Old Zhang's expression changed, and he was momentarily speechless. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so smart and see through him. Nie Tian's face was indifferent, a faint smile on his lips. He had long noticed that old Master Jiang had no intention of making a move. If Elder Jiang really wanted to kill him, he would have done so long ago. There was no need for him to wait for such a long time. However, Nie Tian did not understand why Elder Jiang did not attack him. It was as if this expert was afraid of something. Indeed, Elder Jiang was afraid of something, so he did not make a move. The sword intent that Nie Tian unleashed just now made him fearful. He concluded that Nie Tian's identity was not simple, and there might be a powerful force behind him. Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangqiong, who were standing behind Nie Tian, were also extraordinary. The two of them were very cautious in front of Nie Tian. This made Elder Jiang even more worried. Because of this, he did not attack Nie Tian directly. "Brat, I won't pursue the matter of you injuring young Master Chen. However, you're not allowed to interfere with the Ning family's business, Elder Jiang said to Nie Tian coldly after thinking for a while. That won't do. Nie Tian chuckled. He turned to look at Ning Ziyu and said, I'm still Miss Ziyu's bodyguard. I must ensure her safety. Looking at Nie Tian, Patriarch Zhang's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so insatiable. After a moment of pondering, Patriarch Zhang said in a deep voice, I promise you that nothing will happen to Ziyu. Once again, he compromised with Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned and couldn't help but glance at Ning Mingyuan. It was reasonable for him to protect Ning Ziyu. However, if he forcefully interfered with Ning Mingyuan's business, it would be too much. Mr. Nie Tian, thank you for protecting my daughter. I can take care of my own business, Ning Mingyuan stepped forward and said when he saw Nie Tian's dilemma. Nie Tian's gaze froze, but he did not say a word. Father, I won't let them take you away. Ning Ziyu stepped forward all of a sudden. Her beautiful eyes flickered and she said firmly, Young lady, it's not up to you. Elder Zhang's expression sank as he said coldly. He had accompanied Ning Liangchen to the 7th Cultivator of True Virtues branch to bring Ning Mingyuan back to the Law Enforcement Hall. Ning Ziyu could be spared, but Ning Mingyuan had to follow them back to the Law Enforcement Hall. Ning Mingyuan frowned and his gaze was extremely gloomy. He knew that once he entered the Ning family's Law Enforcement Hall, he would not have a good time regardless of whether he was guilty or not. He would most likely die there. However, Ning Ziyu looked at Elder Jiang and said solemnly, I have the 8th strange bloodline. What did you say? Elder Jiang's gaze froze. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. I have the 8th strange bloodline. Ning Ziyu said word by word. Young lady, the 8th strange bloodline is the supreme bloodline of the Ning family. Anyone with the 8th strange bloodline can enter the main family directly. If you joke about this, I can kill you on the spot. Old Jiang looked at Ning Ziyu and said in a deep voice. His murky eyes were filled with murderous intent. I'm not joking. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled. Following that, her delicate body slightly trembled. Suddenly, a strange power was released and surged around her body. It was actually filled with an aura of nothingness. Following that, a shocking scene appeared. Ning Ziyu's figure actually disappeared in the void. She really disappeared. She disappeared into thin air. This. Nie Tian's gaze froze. His expression could not help but change. He exclaimed in his heart. His mouth was wide open, but he could not say a word. He did not expect such a strange bloodline to exist in this world. Moreover, after Ning Ziyu's figure disappeared, her aura also disappeared. Even with Nie Tian's perception ability, he could not sense Ning Ziyu's existence. However, Nie Tian knew that Ning Ziyu must be right in front of him. It was just that he could not see or sense her. At this moment, he finally understood why Ning Ziyu could escape from the wolf slave farm even though she was not very strong. Elder Jiang was also stunned. His pair of old eyes trembled, and he could not say a word for a long time. The others, including Ning Mingyuan, were also stunned. Chapter 36:11. Chapter 366. The first genius moments later, Ning Ziyu's figure appeared once again. She was standing at the same spot, unmoving. However, her face was pale and her forehead was covered in sweat. It was obvious that activating the 8 variant bloodline had taken a lot out of her. Miss Ziyu, when did your 8 variant bloodline awaken? At this moment, Mr. Jiang had calmed down a little. He looked at Ning Ziyu with a passionate gaze. When I was 6. Ning Ziyu nodded and replied calmly. 6 years old. Mr. Jiang's expression suddenly changed. He froze once again and was speechless for a long time. Awakening the 8 variant bloodline at the age of 6. In the entire Ning clan, there were less than 5 people who could do this. At this moment, Mr. Jiang finally realized that the young lady standing before him was a peerless genius that the Ning clan had not seen in tens of thousands of years. You! Ning Liangchen looked at Ning Ziyu and his eyes trembled. He wanted to say something, but he was too frightened to say anything. He never expected Ning Ziyu's bloodline talent to be this terrifying. His 8-variant bloodline had only awakened when he was in his 20s. Compared to Ning Ziyu, who had awakened the 8-variant bloodline at the age of 6, it was like comparing a snake and a chicken to a dragon and a phoenix. Miss Ziyu, I will now test your bloodline. After a long while, Mr. Jiang calmed down and took out a jade talisman that was as white as snow. He said, Miss Ziyu, release the 8-variant bloodline now. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered. She extended her palm and released the power of the 8-variant bloodline into the jade talisman. The moment the power of the bloodline surged into the jade talisman, the white jade talisman sensed it and its color changed from red to orange, then yellow, then green, and it did not stop. Every time the color of the jade talisman changed, Mr. Jiang's eyes trembled. In the end, the jade talisman turned from white to dark purple. Mr. Jiang's face froze as if he had received a huge blow. He was petrified and did not react for a long time. Purple, purple. Ning Mingyuan, who was watching from the side, looked at the dark purple jade talisman. His eyes trembled in shock and his face froze as well. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Ning Ziyu's bloodline talent was this powerful. Purple represented the strongest of the 8-variant bloodlines. This is impossible, impossible, absolutely impossible. Ning Liangchen looked at the dark purple jade talisman and cried out loudly in shock. He seemed to have gone mad, and his entire state was abnormal. Ning Ziyu's 8-variant bloodline was of the purple rank. There was probably no one in the entire Ning family who possessed such a terrifying bloodline power. Elder Jiang, isn't my 8-variant bloodline very strong? Ning Ziyu looked at Elder Jiang and asked in a puzzled manner. She did not know whether old Master Jiang's reaction was normal or abnormal. Elder Jiang finally reacted. He nodded and said, Miss Purple Rain, your 8-variant bloodline is the strongest that I has ever seen. If he remembered correctly, there were only 2 people in the entire Ning family whose 8 abnormalities bloodline had reached the blue level. However, it was a far cry from Ning Ziyu's purple bloodline. He could not believe that the young girl in front of him was actually the person with the strongest bloodline talent in the entire Ning family. Miss Purple Rain, follow I back to the main house now. Elder Jiang calmed down a little and said excitedly after a while. What about my father? Ning Ziyu frowned and her beautiful eyes flickered. Lord Ning Mingyuan and your family will all return to the main house. Elder Jiang said excitedly. Does my father still have to go to the law enforcement hall? Ning Ziyu could not help but glance at Ning Mingyuan and asked worriedly. Even now, she still didn't understand just how strong her bloodline talent was. Of course not. Old man Jiang laughed and said, Miss Violet Rain, don't worry. After you arrive at the main family, the patriarch will personally see you. As for Lord Ning Mingyuan's matter, I believe that the patriarch will not mind. The Ning family's #1 bloodline genius. Even if her father had made a grave mistake, the master would let him off the hook with just a word from her. Moreover, Ning Mingyuan did not do anything wrong at all. It was all Ning Liangchen's doing behind the scenes. Previously, Ning Liangchen was very talented and was valued by the family. Thus, Elder Jiang turned a blind eye to it. However, it was different now. With Ning Ziyu's talent, she would definitely become an influential figure in the Million Treasure Chamber in the future. Therefore, her words carried real weight. Thank you, Elder Jiang. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled as she thanked him joyfully. Elder Jiang, this. Ning Liangchen's face darkened when he saw this scene. He looked at Elder Jiang speechlessly. He never expected the situation to take a turn for the worse and become like this. Ning Liangchen, you better pray that Lord Ning Mingyuan will not pursue the matter with you. Otherwise, you can just wait for your death. Elder Jiang said with a dark and cold expression. Ning Liangchen's eyes trembled as he sat on the ground with an ashen face. Ning Mingyuan's expression was dark at this moment. His gaze moved between Ning Liangchen and Ning Zifeng, and his entire being seemed extremely cold. Lord Ning Mingyuan, how do you want to deal with these two? Elder Jiang asked directly. He knew that Ning Liangchen's matter would definitely not be covered up after returning to the main Ning family. He did not want to be implicated in any way. Therefore, it was best to settle Ning Liangchen's matter here. Uncle, don't kill me. I don't want to die. Ning Liangchen's eyes trembled as he pleaded on the ground. Father, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Ning Zifeng's face was also pale as he pleaded bitterly. Ning Mingyuan raised his head and looked at Ning Ziyu. The latter shook her head slightly. It was obvious that she did not want to kill Ning Liangchen and Ning Zifeng. Zilin! Ning Mingyuan suddenly shouted after thinking for a moment. Then, Ning Zilin, who was behind him, stepped forward. Destroy their Yuan meridians and make them guard the Ning family. They are not allowed to step out of the Ning residence for the rest of their lives. Ning Mingyuan said with a dark and cold expression. Yes. Ning Zilin replied and walked to Ning Liangchen and Ning Zifeng's side. Without any hesitation, he destroyed their Yuan meridians. When Ye Tian saw this, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, but he did not say anything. He had to admit that Ning Mingyuan's methods were not bad. He punished Ning Liangchen and Ning Zifeng and saved their lives at the same time. However, Ning Liangchen and Ning Zifeng had become ordinary people. They would not have a good life in the future. Miss Ziyu, let's go back to the main house now. At this moment, old Jiang looked at Ning Ziyu with a burning gaze. He could not wait to bring Ning Zifeng back immediately. Old Jiang, I want to stay here for a few days. Let's leave in 3 days. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered as she nodded. All right. Although old Jiang was a little disappointed, he still nodded. Nye Tian was not in a hurry, so he stayed in the Ning residence for a few days. Ning Mingyuan arranged a unique courtyard for the three of them. The environment was elegant and very comfortable. What exactly is the power of the Ning family's 8 variant bloodlines? In the room, Nye Tian frowned and looked puzzled. He was still thinking about the strange scene from before when Ning Ziyu's figure disappeared into thin air. Chapter 36:12. The Net of the Sacred World, Primordial Bloodline? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed when he heard this name. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, Rumor has it that the All-Heaven Sacred World was not like this a long time ago. Instead, all the sacred worlds merged together to form a complete world. This complete sacred world is the original ancient sacred world, also known as the primordial world. Later on, the primordial world experienced a massive sacred world quake. The entire world collapsed and slowly became the current all-heaven sacred world. Is that so? Nye Tian furrowed his brows and his expression changed once again. It was hard to imagine what kind of power could cause a sacred world quake in the primordial world. Nye Tian still did not know how big the all-heaven sacred world was. However, he could imagine that the entire all-heaven sacred world was unbelievably vast from the tiny 7th sacred world of cultivators. Ghost Emperor, just how many sacred worlds are there in the all-heaven sacred world? Nye Tian could not help but ask as his eyes trembled. I don't know. Unexpectedly, the Ghost Emperor shook his head and said, The all-heaven sacred world is infinitely vast. For a very long time, it was thought to be a boundless world. Currently, there are no less than 10,000 known sacred worlds. Aside from that, there are still countless sacred worlds hidden in the dark domain that have yet to be discovered. 10,000. Nye Tian's expression flickered as his pupils constricted. He could not imagine that there were 10,000 sacred worlds in the all-heaven sacred world, and this did not include the ones that had yet to be discovered. He did not dare to imagine just how big the all-heaven sacred world was. It's said that less than 1/100th of all the saints' worlds in the saints' world are known to exist. Most of the saints' worlds are in the obscurity and have yet to be discovered. The Ghost Emperor's voice rang out again with a bitter smile. Nie Tian was stunned. His eyes trembled and he was speechless for a long time. He did not dare to imagine just how big the all-heaven sacred world was. The vastness of this world made him feel a hint of panic. After a while, Nie Tian became cold and asked, "Ghost Emperor, what kind of power is this primordial bloodline you speak of?" The Ghost Emperor smiled and returned to the main topic. The all-heaven sacred world was transformed from the primordial world, and it's rumored that there were 9 supreme bloodlines of the world in the era of the primordial world. They were born from the world, and they were known as the primordial bloodlines. Hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown in confusion. What kind of bloodline power could be born along with heaven and earth? Any power in the world comes from the heavens and earth. The Ghost Emperor frowned and his eyes flickered as he said, "The 9 primordial bloodlines were born together with the heavens and earth. They represent the heavens and earth, so it wouldn't be wrong to call them the bloodlines of the heavens and earth." Nie Tian's eyes flickered as if he understood. Could the 8 strange bloodlines be one of the 9 great primordial bloodlines? Yes, very likely. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, "I actually felt threatened when I saw the little girl's 8 strange bloodline. The 8 strange bloodline is connected to the heavens and earth, and it's full of transformations. The little girl was able to use the 8 strange bloodline to merge with time and space, and even hide her aura. Such a heaven-defying bloodline power must be the primordial bloodline." Nie Tian frowned, a speechless expression on his face. It turned out that the Ghost Emperor was only guessing and wasn't certain that the 8 strange bloodline was the primordial bloodline. However, one thing was for sure. The 8 strange bloodline was extremely powerful. Nie Tian. The Ghost Emperor's expression suddenly sank as his eyes flickered. "Your Monarch Qin might also be the primordial bloodline." Monarch Qin? The power of the Dawn Wolf? Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he was startled. He could feel that the power of the Dawn Wolf was similar to the power of a bloodline. After merging with it, it could directly increase the aptitude of his martial body. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded as if he wanted to say something, but he hesitated and didn't say it. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He smiled and didn't ask too much. Whether the 8 strange bloodline and the power of the Dawn Wolf were the primordial bloodline or not was only the Ghost Emperor's guess. He couldn't confirm it yet, so there was no point in thinking about it. When Nie Tian was strong enough in the future, he would naturally understand the primordial bloodline. For the next 3 days, Nie Tian cultivated in his room. Recently, his strength had been increasing rapidly. Although his martial body could keep up, he still needed to cultivate more, stabilize his realm, and comprehend the power of heavenly charm. 3 days later, Nie Tian and the others arrived at the Ning residence's main hall. Today, Ning Xiu and the others would follow Elder Jiang to the Ning family's main residence, while Nie Tian and the others would go to the Qiankuan sect. The Qiankuan sect was not in the 7th cultivator's sacred world, but in the mid-rank sacred world, the Zongyun sacred world. As for Ning Xiu, she was going to the top-notch heavenly path holy realm. Nie Tian was very confused. How could they go from the 7th cultivator of true cultivators to other holy realms? Moving between holy realms relies on the net of the holy realm. The Ghost Emperor guessed Nie Tian's doubts. He smiled and said, "The net of the holy realm is a huge spacetime net that exists between the holy realms. It is formed by countless spacetime passages. Warriors basically rely on the net of the saints to travel between the saints' realms." "So that's how it is," Nie Tian smiled and said, "since there's the net of the holy realm, it's much simpler." Then, he suddenly thought of something and asked, Since the net of the Holy Realm can allow people to travel between holy realms, it should be very difficult to be discovered, right? The net of the Holy Realm is very comprehensive now. It has completely covered all the known holy realms. The Ghost Emperor smiled and said, "The Holy Realm's warriors have been exploring the net of the Holy Realm for a long time, and it is very mature now. The entire net of the Holy Realm is controlled by the most powerful organization in the Holy Realms. Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He had already heard of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion before he entered the Holy Realm. He knew that it was a very powerful force. Not only did it control the Holy Realms, but it also controlled the realms and planes beneath the Holy Realms. Nie Tian had even seen the people of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion with his own eyes. The net of the Holy Realm connected every single Holy Realm in the Holy Realms. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion naturally had to firmly control such an important thing. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded and smiled. It seems that you have a deep impression of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He smiled and did not say anything else. Next, Nie Tian and the rest left the Ning residence and Ning city, heading for the nearest net of the Holy Realm. The net of the Holy Realm had several net nodes in almost every Holy Realm. Some even had dozens of them. 3 days later, they arrived outside an ancient city. It was the net of the Holy Realm. After they entered the city, they went straight to the huge square in the center of the city. At this moment, the square was filled with people waiting to enter other holy realms. Nie Tian saw a huge formation floating in the air above the square. It was extremely huge, like a small city. Within the formation, there was an extremely dense space-time aura. Visible space-time passageways were arranged in a complicated and irregular pattern. Even through the formation, Nie Tian could still feel the powerful space-time aura. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed. His eyes trembled as he stared at a ball of light in the center of the formation. Chapter 36:13. Chapter 368. Chapter 368 Space, Time Scar. The sudden strange feeling made Nie Tian frown, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Within his body, the fourth star mark within the star power seemed to be stimulated by some kind of power. It suddenly became berserk, constantly releasing terrifying impact. Immediately, he felt as if every inch of his body was about to be torn apart in an instant. A terrifying pain spread throughout his body, causing Nie Tian's expression to turn extremely unsightly. His face turned incredibly pale as cold sweat poured down his face. Nie Tian, what's wrong? Lan Zhuing stood by Nie Tian's side, and her expression couldn't help but change when she saw the latter's reaction, and she asked nervously. I'm fine. Nie Tian's brows were tightly knitted and his face was taut, almost revealing a ferocious expression. He endured the sharp pain and said, as the fourth star scar dark seal became more and more violent, the tearing sensation in his body grew stronger. He felt that every inch of his flesh, every bone, and every meridian in his body was tearing and burning, as if he was going to turn into ashes in the next moment. Lan Zhuing took a step forward and supported Nie Tian. Her delicate face became even more nervous, and she was momentarily speechless. Nie Tian didn't look like he was fine at all. In fact, he looked like he was in deep trouble. Nie Tian. Ing Sangqiong also noticed that something was wrong and shouted, "What kind of power is inside his body?" At that moment, Ning Ziyu walked over and looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, as if she had seen something very terrifying. She let out a cry of astonishment. Not only did the 8-variant bloodline in her body allow her to possess strength that far surpassed that of other martial practitioners of the same level, it also allowed her perception to far surpass that of others. At this moment, he sensed an extremely terrifying power within Nie Tian's body. It seemed to be awakening, like a fierce beast that had been sleeping for a long time. The next moment, it would directly devour Nye Tian. This! Almost at the same time, Elder Jiang also exclaimed in surprise. He looked at Nye Tian and his expression froze. He was speechless. Among everyone present, his cultivation was the highest, and his perception was second only to Ningxiu. He could also sense the terrifying power in Nye Tian's body. He could imagine how much pain Nye Tian was suffering at this moment. He didn't even dare to believe that with Nye Tian's cultivation, he was able to withstand such a terrifying force. The power he sensed even made him feel threatened. At this time, Nye Tian was already drenched in cold sweat. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and he looked very frightening. However, his eyes were still sharp as he stared at the core of the formation in midair. Just what exactly was that ball of light? Why did it cause the fourth star mark to suddenly become berserk? After a long time, Nye Tian felt the restlessness in his body slowly weaken, and the fourth star mark calmed down. He let out a long breath of turbid air and calmed down. His complexion improved a lot. Lan Zhuing looked at Nye Tian. Her beautiful eyes flickered with a strange light as she asked nervously, "Nye Tian, are you all right?" "Everything's fine now," Nye Tian said with a calm smile. The others looked at Nye Tian in confusion. They didn't know what just happened. At this time, Nye Tian looked at Elder Jiang and asked, "Elder Jiang, the formation in the sky is the net of the sacred world, right?" "Yes." Elder Jiang nodded. He looked at Nye Tian with a surprised expression and said, "That formation is the extension of the net of the sacred world in the seventh cultivator's sacred world. The sacred array master protected it with a formation and didn't allow others to get close." Nye Tian's eyes sank as he pointed at the ball of light and asked, "What is that ball of light in the center of the formation?" Elder Jiang was stunned for a moment before he said, "That's a space-time mark. It's said that the net of the sacred world can connect to all the sacred worlds because of this thing." Upon hearing this name, Nye Tian's expression flickered. "Space-time fissures? I don't know what a space-time mark is either. I've only heard that it's a kind of space-time power. When the ancient world collapsed, space-time marks covered all the sacred worlds, and the net of the sacred world was formed by countless space-time marks," Elder Jiang said in a deep voice. He looked at the space-time mark with a trace of respect and fear. Nye Tian nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Next, everyone lined up outside the net. They waited for close to a day before it was finally their turn. At the entrance of the formation, 2 guards glanced at Nye Tian and the others go and asked coldly, "Where are we going?" Elder Jiang replied with a faint smile, "Top sacred world, the heavenly way sacred world." "Top sacred world?" One of the guards was stunned. He glanced at Elder Jiang and the others and said with a disdainful attitude, "Old man, do you know how much it costs to go to a top sacred world per person?" Nye Tian frowned. He didn't expect a guard to be so arrogant. However, these guards weren't weak. They were actually at Heavenly Charm Stage 5. After all, this was the net of the sacred world. It wasn't strange that the Heavenly Way Sacred Pavilion valued this place. "I know." Elder Jiang wasn't angry. He said indifferently, "A top sacred world costs 10,000 supreme grade saint crystals per person. In addition to the 2 of you, it'll be 11,000 supreme grade saint crystals per person." The guard frowned and said, "Old man, you're quite knowledgeable. However, you're wrong this time. A top sacred world costs 50,000 supreme grade saint crystals per person." 50,000. Old Jiang frowned and couldn't help but frown as he exclaimed. From elementary sacred world to top sacred world, it had always been 10,000 supreme grade saint crystals. Why did the price suddenly increase? Moreover, it had increased by 5 times to 50,000 supreme grade saint crystals. Nye Tian was also taken aback and his face darkened. He didn't expect that traveling between sacred worlds would cost so much. 10,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals was a huge sum of money. One must know that when Ye Tian first came to the sacred world, he only spent a few hundred supreme-grade Saint crystals to buy a rank 3 sacred array scroll from the auction house. But now they were only using the net of the sacred world to travel to other sacred world. The cost was staggering. It was hard to imagine how much money the Heavenly Way Sacred Pavilion earned from the net of the sacred world every year. Most importantly, the price of traveling had increased from 10,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals to 50,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals. There were more than 100 people from the Ning clan here. In total, they would have to fork out 5 to 6 million supreme-grade Saint crystals. Even for a chamber of commerce, such a large number was still very shocking. The people from the Ning clan didn't look too good. "Sir, it's usually 10,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals. Why did the price increase suddenly today?" Elder Jiang's eyes were dark and he was obviously furious. However, he suppressed his anger and asked in a deep voice. Chapter 36:14. So what? Old thing, the price today is 50,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals. Together with our commission, it's 55,000 supreme-grade Saint crystals per person. If you think it's too expensive, come back another day, the guard said coldly as he looked at Elder Jiang arrogantly. You! Elder Jiang's face sank. His anger rose as he clenched his fists tightly, but he couldn't say a word. They had walked for 3 days to get here and queued up for an entire day. Now, the guard was asking him to come back another day. How could he not be angry? What about me? The guard sensed Elder Jiang's anger, but he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he became even more arrogant and said provocatively, "Old thing, you better think it through. You know very well what kind of person I am. You're digging your own grave if you attack me." Elder Jiang frowned. His face was extremely gloomy, but he didn't make a move. The guard's strength was nothing, but he was the guardian of the sacred world net, and he represented the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. No one had ever dared to attack someone from the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. "Old geezer, you either pay up now or get lost." The guard glared at him with a pair of dead fish eyes and growled in a low voice, looking even more arrogant. "I'll pay up," Elder Jiang said after hesitating for a long time. To the Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce, a few million supreme-grade Saint crystals were nothing. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to a super prodigy. Although it was a little unjust to pay a few million supreme-grade Saint crystals, it was still comforting when he thought about how the Ning clan had a super bloodline prodigy. "Not bad. You're very sensible." The guard chuckled. He looked at Elder Jiang with even more contempt. Elder Jiang's face was gloomy. He didn't say anything and turned around to signal Ning Mingyuan to pay. However, Ning Mingyuan frowned. He didn't look too good. "What's wrong?" Elder Jiang looked at Ning Mingyuan and asked with a frown. "I don't have enough money." Ning Mingyuan's face stiffened. Elder Jiang's face sank. He didn't expect this to happen. The Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce was one of the 2 largest financial groups in the entire All-Heaven Sacred World. Ning Mingyuan was the president of the 7th Cultivator of Virtues branch, yet he couldn't even afford a few million top-grade Saint crystals. "Old man Jiang, before I came here, I left most of my money to the family, so I only have 1 million or so top-grade Saint crystals with me." Ning Mingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice. He, Ning Xiu, and the others were going to the main family. Naturally, they wouldn't bring too much money with them. Instead, they would leave most of their money to their current family. "Pauper! Hurry up and get lost." When the guard heard Ning Mingyuan's words, his face immediately darkened and he reprimanded him. Old man Jiang's face instantly turned extremely gloomy. If he wasn't afraid of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, he would have killed the guard in front of him with a single palm strike. "Even trash like you want to go to a peak saint's world? What a joke." The guard looked at Elder Jiang and immediately mocked. "A bunch of country bumpkins, hurry up and scram." Elder Jiang, Ning Mingyuan, and the others all had unsightly expressions. The blood in their bodies seemed like it was going to surge in reverse. "Don't you just want money?" At this moment, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Within the calmness there was a trace of coldness. "Yes, I want money." The guard raised his eyebrows and looked coldly at the silver-haired young man in front of him. He said, "Little Silver, are you going to pay for them?" Nie Tian's face darkened. A golden talisman card appeared in his hand, and he directly threw it to the guard. He said, "Is that enough?" The guard caught the talisman card and checked it with his divine sense. His expression couldn't help but change. He was completely dumbfounded. His mouth was wide open, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He didn't expect that the ordinary-looking Nie Tian could take out so much money in one go. The golden talisman card was the Saint Crystal talisman card that was commonly used in the Saint's world. There were more than 30 million supreme-grade Saint crystals in the card. "Old man Jiang, you guys can leave." Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured for Elder Jiang and the others to leave. The reason why he was so rich was obviously thanks to the heavenly wolf of the wolf slave farm. The 30 million supreme-grade Saint crystals were all thanks to him. "Many thanks." Elder Jiang glanced at Nie Tian and nodded. "The Ning family will return the money." With that, he led Ning Mingyuan and the others into the array. Ning Ziyu was the last to leave. She couldn't help but turn around and look at Nie Tian a few times. She was clearly very reluctant to part with him. "We will meet again." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said to Ningxiu. "Yes." Ningxiu nodded heavily, but her eyes were clearly moist. "Hurry up." The guard was a little impatient and growled directly. Only then did Ningxiu wave at Nie Tian and enter the array. Following that, the people in the array arranged for Elder Jiang and the others to enter a spacetime tunnel. Their figures quickly disappeared. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched when he saw that everyone from the Ning family had left. He smiled faintly. "Brat, where are you going?" At that moment, the guard raised his eyebrows and looked at Nie Tian provocatively. "Intermediate Sacred World, Vertical Cloud Sacred World," Nie Tian said with a nod. "Very well. I'll keep this Saint Crystal Talisman card for you. You may enter." The guard nodded and said with a chuckle. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. There were more than 30 million supreme-grade Saint Crystals in his Saint Crystal Talisman card, while the Ning family only spent about 5 million supreme-grade Saint Crystals to go to Sky Path Sacred World. This guard actually wanted to keep the Saint Crystal Talisman card, which was equivalent to charging Nie Tian 25 million supreme-grade Saint Crystals for the trip. Meanwhile, Nie Tian and the others were only going from a primary sacred world to an intermediate sacred world. Under normal circumstances, each of them would only need 1,000 supreme-grade Saint Crystals, so 3 of them would only need 3,000 supreme-grade Saint Crystals. This guard's actions were no different from that of a bandit. "Outrageous! You're clearly robbing us." Ingsang Qiong, who was behind Nie Tian, couldn't stand it anymore and roared furiously. "So what if I'm robbing us? What can you do to me?" The guard was extremely arrogant. He didn't even try to defend himself as he yelled back. "You!" Ingsang Qiong's face darkened. He was speechless for a moment. He didn't expect this little guard to be so arrogant. However, at this moment, Nie Tian waved his hand and gestured for Ingsang Qiong to leave. Then, he took a step forward with a cold smirk on his face. He looked at the guard strangely and said, "Are you sure you want to keep my Saint Crystal Talisman card?" The guard couldn't help but tremble when he sensed the gloominess in Nie Tian's eyes. His heart trembled inexplicably, but in the next moment, he laughed arrogantly and said, "I'm sure." "Very well." Nie Tian smiled faintly as the corner of his mouth twitched. Then, he took a step forward and raised his arm, grabbing at the guard. Chapter 36:15. Chapter 36:10. Chapter 36:10 Threatening with a formation, what do you want to do? The guard suddenly felt a violent force rushing towards him. His expression changed and he cried out in alarm. But before he could finish his words, his entire face was covered by a big hand. "Since you don't want the respect I gave you, then I'll take it from you." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth curled up into a cold smile as he spoke coldly. A sharp sword essence gushed out from his hand and strangled the void. In an instant, the air was filled with the smell of blood. Then, his figure moved and one of his hands was like a steel pincer, grabbing the guard's neck tightly. At this moment, Ing Tsangqiong, Lan Zhuiying, and the people behind them saw an extremely bloody scene. The guard's face had become a bloody mess, as if his entire face had been torn off. Even his facial bones were broken and mixed with the flesh and blood. It was a nauseating sight. When Nye Tian struck out with his palm just now, he used sword essence to tear off the guard's face. Just as he said, he wanted the guard's face. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled violently and they were extremely shocked. They all gasped and were completely speechless. No one expected that the seemingly calm Nye Tian would be so bloody and ruthless when he attacked. What shocked everyone even more was how Nye Tian dared to attack. One must know that the guard was from the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Even if his status in the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the lowest, he was still a martial artist of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion and was protected by the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Yet, Nye Tian actually dared to attack him in front of everyone. This was a direct provocation to the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. In the eyes of the crowd, Nye Tian was simply a lunatic. Nye Tian Yu, Lan Zhuiying and Ing Tsangqiong were stunned for more than 10 seconds before they finally reacted. They stared at Nye Tian in shock and did not know what to say. Although the two of them were very angry just now, they would never directly attack the guard, let alone use such a ruthless method. Nye Tian tearing off the guard's face was equivalent to tearing off the face of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Could it be that Nye Tian did not know how powerful the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was? Of course, Nye Tian knew how powerful the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was, and he had seen it with his own eyes. But the situation just now had reached a point where he could not tolerate it. Since he could not tolerate it, he had to act. "You!" The other guard was scared out of his wits by the sudden turn of events. Only now did he come to his senses. He looked at Nye Tian in shock, his lips trembling, but he couldn't utter a word. He had clearly sensed that Nye Tian was only at the 8th level of Heaven Yun. Why had he suddenly burst forth with such terrifying power? And the guard who had his face torn off was at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. If it was a normal battle from afar, the guard might still have a chance to exchange a few blows with Nye Tian. However, at close range, Nye Tian's sudden attack was not something he could resist. Not to mention a 5th-level Heavenly Mandate Saint Master, even a peak 9th-level Heavenly Mandate Saint Master might not be able to gain an advantage against Nye Tian's martial body at close range. Nye Tian's martial body had long been at the monstrous level of The guard's entire face had been torn off, and his neck was tightly gripped by Nye Tian. At this moment, he wanted to speak, but he was completely unable to. At this moment, dozens of black-clothed warriors appeared in the air. Each of them had an incomparably powerful aura, like a violent dark cloud, their aura oppressing everything. It's the Heavenly Law Guard. When everyone saw the dozens of black-clothed warriors, their eyes couldn't help but tremble as they exclaimed in unison. The Heavenly Law Guard, the guardian of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Nye Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. His divine sense swept across the dozens of Heavenly Law Guards, and he couldn't help but frown. These dozens of Heavenly Law Guards were actually 9th-level Heavenly Mandate Saint Masters. 9th-level Heavenly Mandate Saint Masters were the pinnacle of strength in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. The Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was indeed powerful. Even the warriors guarding the sacred world of 7 cultivators were so terrifying. Who dares to behave so atrociously in the net of the sacred world? At this moment, a heavenly law guard took a step forward. His powerful aura caused the void to tremble as if it was about to collapse. His eyes were incomparably cold as he stared at Nyetian with a murderous look. Nyetian frowned, looked at the heavenly law guardian, and prepared to tell him what had just happened. I didn't want to kill this guard. He was the one who caused trouble time and time again. I had no choice but to attack him. Nyetian frowned, looked at the heavenly law guardian, and prepared to tell him what had happened. Boom! However, before he could speak, the heavenly law guard's body trembled. Suddenly, an extremely violent aura was released, rolling like the sea. The powerful aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Nyetian's eyes slightly narrowed. He suddenly felt a terrifying aura pressing down on him. It was rolling and violent, as if it was going to destroy everything. Boom! Nyetian frowned and took a step forward. A wave of sword aura soared into the sky, directly breaking through the aura pressing down on him. It was no longer possible for a warrior of the 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm to suppress him with aura. The Heavenly Law Guard frowned and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He clearly didn't expect Nyetian to be able to break through his aura pressing down on him. It seems that the people of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion are all the same. You're all unreasonable, Nyetian frowned and said in a deep voice. If that's the case, there's no need for me to explain too much. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying sword aura suddenly surged outside his body. Suddenly, the entire array was impacted and trembled. Young man, what are you trying to do? The Heavenly Law Guard's eyes trembled. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. He growled and his eyes turned red. To his surprise, he sensed an aura of sword intent from Nyetian that made even him shudder. He couldn't believe that this silver-haired warrior was only of the 8th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. I know that you don't care about this guard's life, but you definitely care about this array. Nyetian's lips twitched and he said coldly, I just want to leave this place. If you let me go, everything will be fine. If you want me to stay, I'll destroy this array first. The Heavenly Law Guard's expression suddenly changed. He stared at Nyetian and said, Young man, you still don't know what level this array is at. Do you think you can destroy it with your strength? You can try and see. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. Immediately afterwards, the power of the sword formation surged out of him and condensed into a huge sword shadow around him. The tip of the sword shadow pointed at the space-time rift at the center of the grand spell formation. When the Heavenly Tao Guardian saw this, his eyes trembled, and he let out a cry of astonishment, unable to utter a single word. Chapter 36:16. Don't be impulsive. The Heaven Tao Guardian's eyes were trembling with an unpleasant expression. His gaze toward Nyetian was filled with murderous intent and unconcealable fear. As Nyetian had said, he did not care about the Guardian's life or death, but he had to protect the formation in front of him. Guarding the Grand Array was exactly what he was responsible for. If the formation was destroyed, even if he managed to kill Nyetian, all the Heaven Tao Guardians present, including him, would have a hard time escaping death. However, Nyetian had indeed found the weakness of the grand spell formation. Besides, a strong aura of the formation was emitting from Nyetian's body. The Heaven Tao Guardian did not doubt that Nyetian had the ability to destroy the formation. What's going on? At this time, everyone looked at Nyetian and the Heavenly Law Guardian with puzzled expressions. At this moment, anyone could see that the Heavenly Law Guard was truly threatened by Nyetian. Could it be that Nyetian really had the ability to destroy the grand spell formation? I'll leave now. Don't be impulsive. As the crowd was confused, Nyetian let out a calm smile and signaled Lan Zhuing and Ing Sangqiong to enter the formation. The two immediately entered the formation after collecting their thoughts. They could not believe that Nyetian dared to threaten the Heaven Tao Guardian. Bang! That Heavenly Tao Guard did not move, but the dozens of heavenly Tao guards behind him moved at the same time. In an instant, a powerful aura was unleashed, and a terrifying explosion resounded in the void. "Don't be impulsive." Nietian frowned his eyebrows and said in a cold tone. The silhouette of the swords around him shuddered, as if they were about to be launched at the next moment. "Back off." The Heaven Tao Guardian's eyes widened as he uttered a deep roar. It was obvious that he was extremely nervous. He knew that if Nietian made a move, he wouldn't be able to protect the spacetime rifts, and the grand spell formation would collapse in an instant. Once the formation was destroyed, all of them would be sentenced to death due to their negligence. At this time, he had no choice but to let Nietian go. "Thank you." Nietian looked at the Heavenly Guardian and smiled, then signaled Lan Zhuing and Ing Sangqiong to continue walking forward. The martial artists in the grand array obediently brought them to a space-time passageway and let them leave. The corners of Nietian's mouth twitched slightly, and he could not help but lock his eyes on the space-time scar. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the fourth star-traced dark seal in his body had become a little more active. However, this time, it was not as violent as the last time. Instead, it was in a more gentle and active state. At this moment, Nietian really wanted to take the space-time scar away. However, once he took the space-time scar, it would cause the entire array to collapse. Then, he might not be able to leave this place. Could it be that the space-time scar is the thing that unlocks the fourth star scar dark seal? His eyes trembled slightly as he guessed in his heart. "Nietian, let's go." At that moment, Ing Sangqiong spoke rather nervously. Clearly, he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Nietian had already thoroughly offended the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. The longer he stayed here, the more danger he would be in. "Let's go." Nietian nodded and looked at the Heavenly Guardian from afar. The Heavenly Guardian's face was gloomy, and his eyes were almost bloodshot. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only watch as Nietian left. Nietian threw the guard whose face had been torn apart, then stepped into the spacetime passageway. He, Lan Zhuing, and Ing Sangqiong disappeared in an instant. Only a few seconds after the three of them disappeared did the crowd react. They were extremely shocked and could not believe what they had seen. Who could believe that a holy disciple in the 8th tier of heavenly charm could tear apart the guard's face of the net of the saints, threaten the Heavenly Guardian, and then swagger away in the end? At that moment, everyone looked at the Heavenly Guardian who was standing in the air. He was obviously the leader of this batch of Heavenly Tao Guardians. At that moment, the leader's face was gloomy, and his body was surging with a violent aura. He was like a fierce beast trapped in a cage, about to go berserk in the next moment. "Leader, you must uphold justice for me. That kid tore apart my face. He is provoking the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion and slapping the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's face." After a while, the guard whose face had been torn apart ran out. His face had recovered a little, and he came to the leader of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion and cried. The Heavenly Tao Guardian's face darkened. His eyes suddenly turned and locked onto the guard's body like a sharp blade. "Leader, that kid deserves to die. If we don't kill him, where will the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion put its face?" The guard's eyes trembled, then he cried and said, "The one who deserves to die the most is you." However, right at this moment, the eyes of the commander of the Heavenly Tao Guards turned cold. Then, he let out a low roar and took a step forward. A berserk energy was released and directly pressed toward the guard. Bang! The next moment, before the guard could react, his body trembled and blood exploded on the spot. The air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. The crowd was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their faces changed and their eyes were wide open, unable to react for a long time. The leader of the Heavenly Tao Guardians had a murderous look on his face. He was breathing heavily, like an enraged lion. Although he did not know why Nietian attacked the guard, he could roughly guess the reason. No one would attack the people of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion unless they were forced to the brink. These guards relied on the reputation of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion and looked down on everyone. They were extremely arrogant and wanted to walk with 3 legs. Now there was finally a tough guy who didn't respect the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. This guard still had the guts to run over and shout. The leader of the Heavenly Tao Guardians had nowhere to vent his anger, so he decided to kill him. "Lord Commander, what should we do?" After a long time, a Heavenly Law Guardian cautiously walked over and probed. "Find out who that kid is. I want him blacklisted by the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion." The leader of the Heavenly Tao Guardians fell silent for a while, then roared like a volcano eruption. He looked like a wild beast that had gone mad. The crowd looked at the leader of the Heavenly Tao Guardians and couldn't help but shiver. If Nie Tian was blacklisted by the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, he would be hunted by the people of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. This also meant that he would never have a peaceful day in the all-heaven sacred world. Fortunately, Nie Tian was only blacklisted and not on the heaven-defying list. Otherwise, the people who were hunting him would be real Heavenly Tao experts. However, with Nie Tian's strength, it was a miracle that he was blacklisted by the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. At the same time, 3 figures stood in the void of the Zongyun Sacred World. They were Nie Tian, Lan Zhuiying, and Ying Tsangqiong. At this moment, the 3 of them didn't look too good. They were as pale as a piece of paper. They had just traversed through the sacred world and crossed countless space-time boundaries. They were under tremendous space-time pressure, so it was normal for them to look pale. "Are you guys alright?" Nie Tian glanced at Lan Zhuiying and Ying Tsangqiong and asked with a faint smile. "We're fine." The 2 of them shook their heads and smiled. Their complexions slowly returned to normal. Boom! However, at this moment, a violent explosion suddenly came from the ground, as if the ground had been blasted apart by a terrifying force. Chapter 36:17. Splitting the Earth, What's Going On? Nie Tian stared at the mountain range in the distance. His eyes flickered as he exclaimed. He had never seen such a terrifying scene. A mountain range that spanned for thousands of miles was torn apart just like that. The scene was too shocking. What kind of force was it that was so terrifying that it was able to tear apart such a huge mountain range? Rumble, bang, bang, bang. At this time, the continuous mountain range was still being torn apart. The earth rumbled endlessly, rocks flew everywhere, and turbid waves surged into the sky. A huge crack that was thousands of miles wide appeared on the ground, like a scar on the earth. What kind of force is this? Why is it so powerful? This was clearly the first time Lan Zhuiying had seen such a terrifying scene, and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble as she exclaimed in shock. Bang! As soon as she finished her sentence, a tremendous force shot up into the sky from the ground, creating thousands of waves like a storm. It was as if the sky was going to be torn apart. Dodge it! Ying Tsangqiong's eyes flickered as he screamed and immediately retreated. Nie Tian and Lan Zhuiying instantly realized what was going on. They moved at the same time, and like 2 streaks of light, they shot towards an area of the void. However, the speed of the 3 of them was still a little too slow. Bang! 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 The terrifying force was extremely terrifying. It almost spread across the sky, causing the sky to be filled with a terrifying roar. The moment the force exploded, 3 muffled sounds were heard. Nie Tian and the other 2 were sent flying 10,000 meters away. Nie Tian steadied himself and arrived next to Lan Zhuiying and Ying Tsangqiong. He asked nervously, "Are you guys alright?" "We're fine." Ying Tsangqiong's expression was gloomy. His face was extremely pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his lips. Lan Zhuiying was also injured, even more so than Ying Tsangqiong. She was the last one to react. However, the 2's injuries were not too serious, at least not fatal. Nie Tian's martial body was strong. Although he was attacked, he was not injured. However, He was still shocked in his heart. That power was too terrifying. If the three of them were to be hit head-on, they would definitely be instantly killed by that wild power. What is this power? Nie Tian frowned. He could sense that the power within the storm was even more terrifying than the space-time turbulence. It could kill and annihilate everything. Ing Sangqiong's eyes darkened slightly. He could not help but tremble as he said in a deep voice, "It's the power of the fission of the earth." Earth fission power? Nie Tian had never heard of this kind of power. His eyes darkened and he exclaimed in surprise. Boom! Rumble! Boom! And at this moment, an even more berserk energy was released from the cracks in the ground, rushing towards the sky. It was as if numerous dragons had drilled out from the ground, stirring up the sky. It was a scene of chaos, as if doomsday had arrived. Nie Tian and the other two looked at the scene before them with shock written all over their faces. It was hard to believe that such a terrifying power could be released from underground. After a long time, the restlessness on the ground slowly subsided, and the world returned to normal. What a terrifying power! When the dust dispersed, Nie Tian could not help but sigh in amazement as he looked at the terrifying crack on the ground that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The crack on the ground was like a deep gorge. It was thousands of kilometers long and dozens of kilometers wide. It looked like a terrifying scar had appeared on the ground. Such a scene was extremely impactful, causing one to shudder with fear. Even saint rulers and saint emperors might not be able to do such a terrifying power to directly tear apart a mountain range that stretched for thousands of kilometers in such a short amount of time. Ing Sangqiong, you just said that this is the power of the fission of the earth. What do you mean? Nie Tian looked at Ing Sangqiong and asked with a deep voice. Ing Sangqiong was also very shocked at the moment. He took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. He said, I'm not familiar with the fission of the earth. I've only heard of it before, and it's my first time seeing it. I only know that the fission of the earth is a phenomenon of the world. My teacher said that the fission of the earth is the anger of the earth. It represents the earth's dissatisfaction towards humans. Nie Tian's eyes could not help but darken slightly when he heard what Ing Sangqiong said. He disagreed. He did not really believe in these mysterious things. What he believed was that all power had a source. When the earth fissure occurred just now, he deliberately sensed that there was a very powerful force moving underground, as if there was a huge beast lurking in the endless depths of the earth. The cultivators of the Zongyun sacred world are familiar with the fission of the earth. I often heard people mention it when I was young, but I never thought that the fission of the earth would be so much more terrifying than I imagined it to be. Ing Sangqiong calmed down and said with a smile. The corner of Nie Tian's lips twitched, but he did not say anything. In his eyes, the fission of the earth was definitely not something common. There must be a terrifying secret hidden behind it. Nie Tian, let's go. At this moment, Ing Sangqiong smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. No matter what the fission of the earth was, it had nothing to do with him. It was not something he needed to care about. The three of them did not stop and immediately set off for the Qiankuan sect. The Qiankuan sect was located in one of the three major cities of the Zongyun sacred world, Qiankuan City. As one of the 5 organizations behind the Heart of the Sky, the Qiankuan sect was one of the peak organizations of the Zongyun sacred world. However, due to the ownership of the Heart of the Sky, the 5 organizations were in constant internal strife. Over the past few million years, the Qiankuan sect had retreated from the peak Zongyun sacred world. Now, they were holed up in the middle-rank Zongyun sacred world. According to Ing Sangqiong, the Qiankuan sect had once been glorious. Even in the peak Zongyun sacred world, they were an extremely powerful organization. But now, the Qiankuan sect declined more and more. In the end, they could only hide in the Zongyun sacred world. Compared to the Qiankuan sect, the other 4 organizations were not much better. Even the strongest, the Heaven Martial Association, could only barely establish themselves in the peak Zongyun sacred world. Due to the internal strife, the 5 organizations would all be removed from the peak Zongyun sacred world. People could not help but sigh over this outcome. 5 days later, Nie Tian's group arrived outside a majestic ancient city. The huge city walls were several thousand meters tall, and there was a stone sword on each side of the city gate. They were actually over 10,000 meters tall, like 2 giants that guarded the ancient city. A sharp presence flowed through them, making them look extremely sharp. Nie Tian, this is Qiankuan City. Ing Sangqiong smiled faintly and pointed at the ancient city below. His eyes were filled with pride. He had grown up in Qiankuan City, so he had special feelings for the huge city that was famed for its sword. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He expanded the senses of his soul and immediately sensed the tremendous sword intent that flowed through the sky above Qiankuan City. The vastness seemed endless. Chapter 36:18. Cosmos Sword Formation. Nie Tian looked at the Qiankuan City, his eyes trembling slightly. Under the protection of such a huge sword formation, the Qiankuan City was incomparably sturdy. Moreover, under the protection of the sword formation, it was very beneficial for swordsmen to cultivate. At such a young age, Ing Sangqiong already had the sword Dao cultivation of the 9th heaven of sword rhyme. It probably had a lot to do with him living in the Universe City. Nie Tian, the sword formation that protects Cosmos City, is called the Heaven and Earth Sword Formation. It was built by the first sect master of the Cosmos sect, along with 1,000 of the most outstanding swordsmen and dozens of Saint Spell Formation grandmasters of the Cosmos sect. Ing Sangqiong knew that Nie Tian was trying to sense the Cosmos Sword Array. He smiled and said, "The Cosmos Sword Array took 60,000 years and is a rank 8 sacred array. It's enough to defend against the attacks of the Sky Martial Divine Ancestors." Furthermore, when the Cosmos Sword Array was completed, the first-generation sect master and the 1,000 swordsmen and dozens of sacred array masters sacrificed their blood to the array, fusing their sword Dao will into the array and protecting the Cosmos City with their lives. Once the Cosmos Sword Formation is attacked, it can instantly release 10,000 sword shadows. Each sword shadow has the power to kill a heavenly tribulation Saint King expert. Ing Sangqiong's expression was solemn as he spoke to this point. His eyes were filled with reverence. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was shocked. He hadn't expected the Cosmos Sword Formation to come about like this. The first-generation sect master, 1,000 swordsmen, and dozens of holy formation grandmasters actually sacrificed their lives to build this formation. It was truly admirable. Inside the Cosmos Sword Formation was their flesh and blood, their will, and the things they had to protect for their entire lives. However, the power of the Cosmic Sword Formation was extremely great. It could actually release 10,000 sword blurs in an instant, and every single one of them had the power to kill a heavenly tribulation saint ruler. In other words, the Cosmic Sword Formation could instantly kill 10,000 saint kings. Such terrifying power was simply unfathomable. With the protection of the Cosmos Sword Array, Cosmos City was simply an impenetrable fortress. Let alone the fact that no one in the Cloud's Urge sacred world could pose a threat to the Cosmic Sword Formation, probably not even a lot of experts from Peak Saints' worlds could. At this moment, Lan Zhuing's eyes flickered, and she said indifferently, "Perhaps the first sect master felt that the Qiankuan sect owed him something when he moved the Qiankuan sect to a mid-level sacred world, so he sacrificed his life to protect the sword formation." When Ing Sangqiong heard what she said, he could not help but glance at her. He was obviously a little angry, but he did not say anything. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Although Lan Zhuing's words weren't pleasant to hear, they made some sense. For a powerful sect to relocate from a peak sacred world to a middle sacred world, it was already the sect's fault. As the leader of the sect, it was normal for the sect leader to feel guilty. "Nie Tian, let's enter the city." At this moment, Ing Tsang Cheong smiled and said to Nie Tian, Nie Tian nodded and followed Ing Tsang Cheong into the city. Under Ing Tsang Cheong's lead, the three of them entered the city successfully. After entering the city, Nie Tian sensed the presence of sword intent in the air and gained a better understanding of the power of the cosmic sword formation. Even a swordsman with mediocre talent would probably be able to increase their strength very quickly if they bathed in the sword intent. Most of the people in the surroundings were swordsmen, but their expressions were rather strange. It was as if they were under some sort of pressure, causing them to walk slowly. The streets of the cosmic sword formation were slightly different from other cities. They were much wider, and the streets were not in a straight line. Instead, they were shaped in a special way like a maze. Nie Tian could not help but wonder why the streets were built like this. Not only did it take up more resources, but it was also inconvenient to walk on it. However, a while later, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. As he walked on the streets, he actually felt a faint pressure of the sword appear and press down on him. "What's going on?" Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed. "Amazing!" At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice was suddenly heard. He exclaimed and his eyes were trembling, shining brightly. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian was stunned and could not help but be surprised. Could it be that the Ghost Emperor had discovered something extraordinary? This street is actually a sword pattern. The Ghost Emperor's eyes darkened slightly and he said in surprise, "Sword pattern?" Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. The next moment, he realized something and his expression changed in shock. At this moment, he realized that the winding street under his feet was like some kind of talisman. It turned out that this strange street was actually a sword pattern. In other words, the entire street was actually a part of the sword formation. The street was covered with sword patterns. No wonder Nie Tian felt a strong pressure of the sword appear at this moment. Moreover, the surrounding swordsmen also looked solemn. They must have been under a very strong pressure of the sword. Why is there a pressure of the sword? At this moment, Lan Zhuiying also felt that something was wrong and said with her beautiful eyes, "This is a major feature of the Cosmos God City. The entire street is a part of the Cosmos God formation. When the swordsmen walk on the street, the formation will automatically sense the swordsman's sword will and slowly release the pressure of the sword. It will train the swordsman's sword will without causing any harm to them." Ing Tsangqiong smiled faintly and calmly. It was obvious that he was already familiar with the pressure of the sword. As expected, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he smiled faintly. The Cosmos God City was more mysterious than he had imagined. No wonder he saw that although the surrounding swordsmen were young, all of them had basically reached the realm of sword charm. Nie Tian and the others continued to walk. About half an hour later, they arrived outside a magnificent giant palace. The shape of the palace in front of them was strange. From afar, it looked like a giant sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. Outside the giant sword, there were countless smaller buildings that looked like sword towers. They were like stars surrounding the moon, surrounding the largest giant sword. Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes flickered. She was obviously shocked by the palace in front of her. Nie Tian, Miss Lan, this is where the Qiankuan sect is located, the Cosmos Sword Palace. Ing Tsangqiong glanced at Nie Tian and Lan Zhuiying and said with a proud smile, "What a magnificent Cosmos Sword Palace." Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he couldn't help but exclaim. He had never seen such a strange and majestic palace before. "Let's go." Ing Tsangqiong smiled faintly and took a step forward, ready to enter the Qiankuan palace. Boom! However, right at that moment, a terrifying sword aura suddenly whizzed out of the universe sword palace, raising terrifying waves in the void. Like a mad beast, it pounced towards Nie Tian and the others. Nie Tian's eyes widened in shock. Chapter 36:19. Chapter 36:14. Chapter 36 14 Zhang Kuang Kunlong Boom. Terrifying power surged out of the void, causing rumbling sounds to echo out as it charged towards Nie Tian and the others with a murderous aura. Watch out! Ing Sangqiong's eyes trembled and he suddenly felt the killing intent and growled. Nie Tian frowned and stepped out. The sword of sky appeared in his hand and he slashed out. The shadow of the sword whizzed like a dragon and took the attack head-on. Boom! In the next moment, the two extremely strong forces collided. Suddenly, there was a roar in the air as if the sky and earth were about to collapse. Then, a terrifying force rolled out and spread in all directions. Bang! Immediately after, there was a muffled sound and Nie Tian's figure was forced back dozens of meters. Wherever his feet passed, the blue stone floor cracked. After he steadied himself, there was a wound on his wrist and blood stained half of his arm. That bloody wound was caused by that force. From this, it could be seen how strong that force was. Seeing that, Ing Sangqiong and Lan Zhuing stepped forward at the same time and looked at Nie Tian anxiously. Nie Tian, are you okay? I'm fine. Nie Tian nodded slightly and then looked at the sky above the Cosmic Sword Palace. There stood a figure in black. He stood there like a sharp sword, and the sharpness of his aura surged in the air, as if he was about to tear the sky and earth apart. The person who attacked just now was him. In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He saw that the man in black was very young and looked even younger than Ing Sangqiong. But his strength was not weak at all. His martial arts cultivation had reached the fifth heaven of the heavenly mandate realm, and his swordsmanship had reached the fifth heaven of the oracle realm. At such a young age, he had such strength. This person was undoubtedly a top genius. At that moment, the man in black had a frosty expression and his eyes were extremely cold. He stared at Nie Tian like a sharp blade, as if he was about to kill in the next moment. Ing Longshao, what are you doing? At this moment, Ing Sangqiong looked at the black-clothed cultivator and growled coldly. Clearly, he was furious. Of course, he knew this black-clothed swordsman. The latter was one of the two strongest swordsmanship geniuses of the younger generation in the Qiankuan sect. He was known as Kunlun. In the Qiankuan sect, the two strongest swordsmen of each generation would receive a special title, and they would be known as the Qiankuan swordsmen. In Ing Sangqiong's generation of swordsmen, Ing Longshao was one of the two cosmic swordsmen, and his title was Kunlun Long. As for the other Qiankuan swordsman, his name was Zhu Zia, also known as Qiankuan Storm. Qiankuan sect and Qiankuan sect were the two strongest swordsmen of this generation. Ing Sangqiong's talent and strength were also very strong among the younger generation, but compared to the Qianya Kunlong, he was much weaker. Ing Sangqiong did not know why Ing Longshao would suddenly appear and attack Nie Tian. On behalf of the Qiankuan sect, I'm here to welcome the Master of the Sky, Ing Longshao said in a low voice with a sense of oppression and threat. Although he said welcome, he definitely did not think so in his heart. If Nie Tian's reaction was a little slower, or if his strength was a little weaker, he would have died a horrible death. Welcome. Lan Zhuing frowned and said coldly, the way the Qiankuan sect welcomes people is really special. Nie Tian's eyes were gloomy and he did not look too good. How could he not tell that Ing Longshao was not here to welcome him, but to show him off? However, he was very curious. He had just arrived at the Qiankuan sect, but how did the people of the Qiankuan sect know that he had arrived? Ing Sangqiong did not inform the people of the Qiankuan sect in advance. If he did so, he would definitely tell Nie Tian. Nie Tian guessed that there should be something in the Qiankuan sect that could sense the heart of the sky. It was precisely because of this that the people of the Qiankuan sect knew that he had arrived. He is the master of the sky. If he can't even take a blow from me, what right does he have to stand here? Ing Longshao's eyes were like a venomous wolf's as he stared at Nie Tian sinisterly and said coldly. His tone was insufferably arrogant. Ing Longshao, Do you know that you almost hurt Nye Tian just now? Ing Sangqiong was obviously very angry, and he said in a low voice, So what if I hurt him? Ing Longshao smiled coldly and said arrogantly, Do you think the master of the sky can't be hurt? If he can't even get past me, what right does he have to be the master of the sky? Nye Tian has merged with the heart of the sky, so he is the master of the sky. Ing Sangqiong's eyes darkened and he shouted in a low voice. Ing Longshao's face darkened and his eyes flickered strangely. He then sneered and said, Ing Sangqiong, it seems like you've already acknowledged his identity as the master of the sky. Did you lose to him? I did lose to Nye Tian. So what? Ing Sangqiong's face stiffened and he said coldly. So you lost. No wonder you became someone's dog. Ing Longshao's eyes darkened and he said coldly. You? Ing Sangqiong's eyes trembled. He did not expect Ing Longshao to say that about him. He was just about to refute when he felt a surge of blood in his body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Spitting blood? Ing Longshao sneered again when he saw this and said, Ing Sangqiong, I used to think that you were a genius, but looking at you now, you don't even deserve to be called a scum. Ing Sangqiong's eyes narrowed and anger surged in his body. He felt the blood in his body become even more violent. Don't talk. Be calm. At this moment, Nye Tian walked to Ing Sangqiong's side and sent a stream of sword essence into the latter's body. Of course, he knew that Ing Sangqiong was spitting blood not because he was narrow-minded, but because he was angry and his blood was out of control. Ing Sangqiong had once been possessed by Langqin. His strength had increased too quickly and his realm was unstable. It was difficult to control his blood in the first place. It was not surprising that his blood was out of control in a moment of anger. I'm fine now. Ing Sangqiong let out a long sigh of relief after being soothed by Nye Tian's sword essence. His complexion looked much better. Nye Tian nodded slightly and looked up at Ing Longshao. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said, You're here to welcome me. That sword attack just now was just a test, right? I want to know how you're going to welcome me next. It was obvious that Ing Longshao did not use his full strength in the sword attack just now. He was only testing Nye Tian. Nye Tian was more concerned about what he was going to do next. Nye Tian, you should know that many people in the Qiankuan sect don't like to see you, the master of the sky. Ing Longshao's eyes were extremely gloomy. He locked his cold gaze on Nye Tian and said, If you want to be acknowledged by the Qiankuan sect, I, Ing Longshao, will be the first obstacle you have to pass. Oh, is that so? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and the corner of his mouth twitched. He did not deny it. Ing Longshao seemed to think too highly of himself. He claimed to be the spokesperson of the Qiankuan sect. Nye Tian felt that Ing Longshao could not represent the Qiankuan sect. Chapter 36:20. Chapter 36:15. A shocking attack. Ing Longshao, are you crazy? Ing Sangqiong's eyes darkened when he saw Ing Longshao about to attack Nye Tian again. Nye Tian, take 3 strikes from me. However, Ing Longshao had gone crazy at this moment. His eyes were filled with a fervent murderous intent as he said in a loud voice, If you're still alive after 3 strikes, I'll admit that you're the ruler of the sky. Kill. With these words, he let out a ferocious roar. Like a ferocious beast, a long black sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed it out. A terrifying sword shadow instantly appeared, crushing down towards Nye Tian like a mountain. This lunatic! Ing Sangqiong's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. He did not expect Ing Longshao to actually kill Nye Tian. Either way, Nye Tian was the ruler of the sky. If he were to die in the hands of the Qiankuan sect, would the other 4 factions let the matter go? If Nye Tian were to die, there was no doubt that the 5 factions would start a civil war once again. Back off. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he immediately sensed a monstrous murderous intent surging toward him. He let out a roar and ordered Ing Tsangqiong and Lan Zhuiying to back off. 9 limits of the starry sky, destruction of the sun. In the next instant, the sword of the sky in his hand slashed across the sky. Sword intent burst out from his body like a tsunami as the sword shadows soared into the sky. Boom! Bang bang bang! The 2 sword shadows collided with one another in the sky like 2 giant dragons. A terrifying explosion was heard as the 2 sword shadows collided with one another. They collided, devoured, and destroyed one another. Waves of terrifying sword intent surged into the sky as if they were going to devour the heavens and earth. Bang bang bang! A moment later, 2 muffled sounds could be heard as Nie Tian and Ing Longshao were knocked back at almost the same time. Nie Tian was knocked back tens of meters. The bluestone floor under his feet was left a few meters deep ravine. Ing Longshao, who was in midair, retreated several hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. In a head-on collision, the 2 seemed to be equally matched. However, Nie Tian suffered some minor injuries, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. When Lan Zhuiying and Ing Tsangqiong saw this, their expressions changed. They looked at Nie Tian in shock and could not believe their eyes. They hadn't expected Nie Tian's strength to reach such a terrifying level. If they were the ones to resist Ing Longxiao's sword, even if they managed to block it, they would definitely be severely injured. Nie Tian, on the other hand, had only suffered minor injuries. More importantly, both of them knew that Nie Tian was far from revealing his true strength. At this time, Ing Longxiao's cold eyes trembled. He looked coldly at Nie Tian and exclaimed, Although he had gained the upper hand, he didn't feel happy at all. Instead, he was extremely shocked. Nie Tian's strength was far beyond his imagination. He couldn't believe that a swordsman who was only at the 3rd heaven of sword aura could block his sword. Regardless of whether he admitted it or not, his sword essence talent was far below Nie Tian's. The second sword, kill. In the next moment, Ing Longshao roared once more, and then his figure flashed as he slashed with his sword. The sword intent in the sky surged like a storm, and its imposing aura covered the heavens and the earth as if it intended to obliterate everything. Roar! Then, the violent sword essence condensed into a black dragon in the void. It was tens of thousands of meters long. The huge body of the dragon rolled in the void and pressed down on heaven and earth as it charged at Nie Tian. Bloodline power! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He could feel the aura of the bloodline power. It seemed that Ing Longshao had directly used the bloodline power. Nie Tian, watch out! Ing Tsangqiong's eyes trembled violently and he couldn't help but scream. Ing Longshao was really a madman. He actually used the bloodline power. Sacred heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and man, sacrifice of the sun. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he spoke in a low voice. Instantly, his aura surged madly, and a terrifying sword aura shot up into the sky. Next, a sword shadow appeared, like a giant, supporting the heavens and the earth. The terrifying aura it exuded seemed to be able to resist everything. Boom! In the next moment, the black dragon and the sword shadow collided in the void. The void rumbled and the heavens and earth seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Bang bang bang, PSSST, PSSST, then, the sound of explosions and ear-piercing roars rang out continuously in the sky. The collision between the 2 sword essences set off endless monstrous waves. At this moment, many spectators appeared in the surroundings. They were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled and they were speechless. Ing Longshao was a very famous swordsman in the Qiankuan sect. Most people knew him and were very optimistic about his strength. But Nie Tian was only at the 8th level of heavenly rhythm and the 3rd level of sword rhythm. How could he fight against Ing Longshao head-on? Bang! At this moment, the black dragon and the sword shadow in the sky suddenly trembled and directly exploded, turning into a violent wave. Nie Tian's figure retreated again, and several wounds appeared on his body. Ing Longshao wasn't any better than him. He was directly pushed back 1,000 meters, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Ing Longshao is injured. When the two of them stabilized themselves, everyone's focus was on the trace of blood at the corner of Ing Longshao's mouth. They all exclaimed in shock. It was hard to believe that Ing Longshao had actually been injured in this battle. Damn it! Ing Longshao stood in the sky and roared like a wild beast. The sword intent in his body surged crazily and was extremely violent. He didn't expect that even after using the power of his bloodline, he still couldn't defeat Nie Tian. He even suspected that this swordsman in front of him was really only at the 3rd level of sword rhythm. The 3rd sword. Following that, Ing Longshao let out a low roar, and every single word he uttered was filled with killing intent. His eyes were scarlet red, and it was obvious that he had gone berserk. The 3rd sword won't be so simple. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Suddenly, he stomped his feet and a huge pit appeared on the ground. His figure was already thousands of meters in the sky, facing Ing Longshao. Ing Longshao, since you dare to provoke me, then I won't be polite. Nie Tian's eyes were murderous and cold, not concealing his threat at all. Ing Longshao's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He could sense an extremely strong threatening aura from Nie Tian. This aura made him very uneasy. Boom! At this moment, Nie Tian took a step forward. The sword intent in his body surged and circulated in the void. Then, the sword intent in his body skyrocketed. His entire body was like a vortex of sword intent that suddenly erupted. How could this be? Ing Longshao looked at Nie Tian and exclaimed in shock when he sensed the sword intent aura in the latter's body. He simply couldn't believe that Nie Tian's sword Dao realm had actually improved in an instant. Archean Saint Soul. At the same time, in the void far away, a pair of hidden eyes stared at Nie Tian and could not help but murmur. It was obvious that the person was very shocked. Chapter 36:21. Lord of Qianquan, Archean Saint Soul. That pair of hidden eyes stared at Nie Tian, feeling the sword aura around Nie Tian that was constantly increasing, and his eyes were burning with passion. He had never expected that such a young master of the sky would have a Archean Saint Soul in his body. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly narrowed as if he had seen something extremely terrifying, and his face stiffened. He sensed that there were actually 2 Archean Saint Souls in Nie Tian's body. This discovery made him feel inexplicably excited, and his eyes widened so much that his eyeballs were about to pop out. It was the first time he had seen 2 Archean Saint Souls perfectly fused into a martial artist's body. He could not imagine how Nie Tian was able to fuse the 2 Archean Saint Souls so perfectly. Boom! At this moment, the sword aura around Nie Tian's body skyrocketed like a sword aura volcano that erupted in an instant. The terrifying sword aura seemed to be able to annihilate everything. His sword principal realm rose rapidly with the crazy eruption of the sword aura. Almost in an instant, he advanced from the 3rd heaven of sword aura realm to the 8th heaven of sword aura realm. The activation of the Sky Evolution Saint Soul and the Omniscient Saint Soul at the same time actually caused Nie Tian's sword principal realm to skyrocket by 5 levels. The power of the 2 Saint Souls seemed to have increased correspondingly with the increase of Nie Tian's strength. How is this possible? What did that kid do? How did his sword principle improve instantly? Everyone looked at Nie Tian in the sky with trembling eyes and screamed in shock. The shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangqiong were not too surprised by Nie Tian's performance. After all, they had seen Nie Tian's more heaven-defying moments. But at this moment, Ing Sangqiong's expression was very ugly. Looking at Nie Tian's stance, it seemed like he was not willing to give Ing Longshao the chance to unleash the 3rd sword move. Nie Tian used 2 primordial sacred souls at the same time, clearly intending to kill Ing Longshao directly. When Nye Tian was at the third heavenly layer of sword rhythm, he was already on par with Ying Longshao. Now that he had reached the eighth heavenly layer of sword rhythm, would Ying Longshao still be able to block his sword? It was precisely because of this that Ying Sangqiong's expression turned ugly. After all, Ying Longshao was the Qiankuan sect's Qiankuan swordsman. Although he wasn't a true expert in the Qiankuan sect, he was the face of the Qiankuan sect, a kind of symbol. If Nye Tian killed the universe swordsman, it would be a direct demonstration to the universe sect. In that case, it would be even more difficult for him to get the Qiankuan sect to recognize his identity as the Lord of the Sky. Boom! At this moment, the sword intent around Nye Tian rumbled. The two primordial sacred souls had stimulated his sword intent to its limit, making him look like a huge sword that stood in the void. His sword aura was oppressive, as if even the heavens and earth had to bow before him. This! Ying Longxiao's eyes suddenly trembled. The arrogance from before was no longer there, and it was replaced by unconcealable nervousness and fear. He had not expected Nye Tian to be able to elevate his sword intent to such a terrifying level in an instant. It was obvious that he had underestimated the Lord of the Sky in front of him. However, he had already bragged and looked down on Nye Tian with 3 swords. It was obviously impossible for him to retreat now. Fight! In the next moment, Ying Longxiao's face darkened, and a vicious look flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, the power of the bloodline in his body exploded, and streaks of violent sword intent surged out like rolling dark clouds, as if they were going to annihilate everything. Very well. The corner of Nye Tian's lips twitched as a strange light flashed in his eyes. His current strength had reached such a terrifying level that even he himself was a little surprised. Ever since he had leveled up, he had not fought a real battle. At this moment, he released the power of the 2 primordial sacred souls to test out his extreme combat strength. However, this was not his real goal. He had another, more important goal: kill. At this moment, Nye Tian's eyes turned cold as he growled. Instantly, sword intent erupted from his body like a raging dragon. The void around him rumbled as if it was going to collapse at any moment. Ying Longxiao's eyes trembled, and his expression changed. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with despair. When Nye Tian's sword intent was released, he finally realized how terrifying Nye Tian was at this moment. At this moment, he understood that he was no match for Nye Tian at all. Boom! At this moment, a thunderous boom rang out in the sky as a gigantic sword shadow the size of a mountain appeared, rumbling with killing intent as it slammed towards Ying Longxiao. Ying Longxiao's eyes widened as he felt extreme despair at this moment. The aura of death shrouded his entire body. The crowd's eyes trembled violently as the shock in their hearts reached its peak. Unbelievable, Nye Tian was really going to kill Ying Longxiao. Stop! At the last moment, a deep voice echoed in the sky, followed by a powerful sword intent that descended from the sky. It was as gentle as the rain and as gentle as the wind. The moment it landed, it immediately dissolved the violent shadow of the sword in the air. The originally violent void became clear in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Finally willing to come out? Nye Tian stared at the sky with no sign of surprise on his face. Instead, his lips twitched slightly as he murmured. He had long sensed that there was a pair of eyes observing everything from high up in the sky. He had unleashed his ultimate sword intent to kill Ying Longxiao in order to force the person hiding in the void to come out. As expected, the person hiding in the void could not help but show himself. Nye Tian's eyes widened as he stared at the black-robed figure. He was deeply shocked by the latter's strength. The black-robed figure stood in the void like a mountain. The sword intent around him was not strong, as he was obviously trying to hide it. However, the aura of the sword intent was extremely terrifying. It was as powerful as the ocean and as sharp as a blade. It seemed like the surrounding void would collapse if the person moved. This person is definitely an expert from Saint Tianyi. He might even be a heavenly tribulation saint. Nie Tian's face sank as he exclaimed in his heart. He had only sensed the existence of the person hiding in the void, but he had not expected the person to be so powerful. Leader! At this moment, Ing Longxiao's eyes trembled as he looked at the black-robed cultivator. He exclaimed in shock as his face turned extremely ugly. Leader! Ing Sangxiong's eyes widened as he exclaimed in shock.